Scooby-Doo is one of the most recognized animated characters in history. Most people on Earth from all age groups have at least heard the name Scooby-Doo, even if they have never seen any of the many iterations of the character. From theatrical movies, video games, comics, and more merchandise than you can possibly imagine, the Scooby-Doo franchise has significantly stapled itself into the childhood of generations. Considered to be Joseph Barbera and William Hanna's greatest accomplishment, the success of Scooby-Doo led to the building blocks that would become Cartoon Network, and its legacy is still felt today, being now under the banner of Warner Brothers. Scooby-Doo kind of broke the mold at the time in 1969. Originally called Who's Scared, the series was pitched for a child audience, but deliberately made to be a darker show than what was the norm. This was a gamble for Hanna-Barbera, as they were told that kids would be too scared of the monsters. To fix this, the team decided to make Scooby-Doo the main character, and added comedic undertones to lift some of the tension. This turned out to be a massive hit, far greater than anyone could have anticipated. The original series had a stellar voice cast, with the talent of Nicole Jaffe, Heather North, Frank Welker, Don Mesnick, and Casey Kasem. These talented voice actors were responsible for making the Mystery Gang timeless icons that still hold up even today. But what really made the original show so amazing was the art. The original backgrounds for the series were created by the incredibly talented Walt Paragoy, who was previously an artist for Walt Disney and worked on movies like 101 Dalmatians. Art backgrounds this detailed were very rare for 30-minute cartoons, which really led to the creepy mood of the series. Just look at some of these insane illustrations. Without this haunting art style dripping throughout each moment, I fear the series would have felt lackluster when considering the monster designs. The original Scooby-Doo series has some of the most memorable monster designs, more so than the vast majority of future installments in the franchise. Some of these creatures are even brought back and reused in modern iterations. From the unhinged cackle of the kooky Space Kook to the iconic Creeper, these guys are what made Scooby-Doo the pop culture juggernaut that has lasted to this day. But not all monsters were created equally. Some were extremely unique monsters, while others were little more than generic monster stereotypes. Now I ask the question, which monsters are the best? Well, sit back, grab a coffee and a Scooby snack, because today we are going to rank all the monsters from Scooby-Doo Where Are You? Okay guys, so in this video I'm going to be ranking the monsters based on 3 categories. Number 1, how dangerous they actually are. And by this, I mean, did the monsters pose a real deadly threat to the gang? An example would be like the Snow Ghost about to chop Velma in half with a buzzsaw. That's pretty dangerous, right? And then secondly, the setting they are in. And by this, I mean the haunted houses they're in, or the areas like the graveyard of ships. Spooky settings that would add scare factor to the monsters. And then lastly, the overall design. And by this, I will be going over and picking apart the design of the monsters to see which one are the most unique and entice the most fear. Also, I will be going in order of the episodes that the monsters show up in. So we'll start with What a Night for a Night, and then we'll end with Don't Fool with a Phantom. So basically, the ranking system in this one will be a little different. So if you can get 5 out of 5 stars, then you would be an S tier with a total of 15 points. If you get a 1 out of 5 stars in all categories, then you'd be an F tier with a total of 3 points. Each point system will be about 1 or 2 up from each other. So A would be 12, B would be 10, C would be 8, D would be 6, and E would be 4. So that's basically how I'm going to do this. So the first monster on the chopping block is the Black Knight from What a Night for a Night. This was the first episode of the Scooby-Doo Where Are You show, and you can tell this by the unique title card. This was actually a picture of the Black Knight. Past this and a clue for Scooby-Doo, they kind of got rid of this and just had the gang running while the episode title would play in the back. Kind of wish they would have done this for all the episodes though, because it is really cool to see. Anyway, this episode really set the standard for what this series was going to be. And for the most part, it's a solid episode that really establishes each character with their own personalities and quirks. Like, Shaggy uses ventriloquism in this episode, one of the many skills he ploys against the villains.
My ventriloquism bit can get us out of this jam. If I can throw my voice to make it sound like it's coming from the room, he might leave. Help! Let me out of this pot!
But this largely gets replaced later on by gags with Scooby. as the series progresses. Another staple that is shown here is Velma's inability to keep her glasses on her head, or Daphne's disposition for bad luck. Seriously, with her luck, not even investing in Bitcoin would be safe. As for the monster in this episode, the Black Knight is the first monster the gang unmasked and is one of Scooby-Doo's more well-known monsters. He has popped up quite a bit in the franchise. However, they kind of make this episode sound like the gang have been on other mysteries before this one. But this is also because the show really didn't have a set continuity, so these would be airing on the television randomly. People didn't really want to get boggled down by having to connect the dots and watch episodes in order, which is really intelligent. The Black Knight unmasked was Mr. Wickles. His whole nefarious scheme was to duplicate pieces from the museum and sell the originals. His forgery plan was foolproof except for one minor hiccup. One of the new museum exhibits was the Black Knight suit of armor, en route from England and being delivered by none other than
Professor Hyde!
Mr. Wickles knew that the professor was the one person who could identify the fakes, so he hatched a scheme to kidnap the professor and make it look like he just vanished. He waited at the dock for the Black Knight shipping crate and then climbed into the suit of armor for when the professor would pick it up. En route, the Black Knight came to life and took the professor back to the museum where he was hidden in plain sight. I hope they at least gave him bathroom breaks. The Black Knight's evil doings would be put to an end when a skinny, perpetually hungry stoner and his talking dog would happen upon this empty suit of armor, left in the professor's place. The episode ends with the Black Knight being chased down by a World War I airplane and millions of dollars worth of art being destroyed. Oh yeah, this is also the first episode and first example of the gang literally breaking the law in breaking into private property and trespassing and destroying public property. Like, I feel like they probably did more damage to the museum's art pieces than Mr. Wickles did. So let's talk about this guy. First off, how dangerous was the Black Knight? Well, his crimes did include forgery and kidnapping, both of which are federal crimes. The fact that he kidnapped a man because he feared his forgeries would be found out means he is willing to commit desperate acts to protect himself from discovery. Now, to be fair, the professor was still alive and seemed to be fine. Most kidnappers kill their victims or ransom them for money. Not sure why they just left the good old Hyde White alive, since the professor knew more now than before he was kidnapped. But I think it would have only been a matter of time before he would have been killed and disposed of. Unless he was going to be the new human statue exhibit. In terms of physical threat to the gang, the Black Knight was a suit of medieval armor, and so it would lend the user some level of added durability and striking power. But overall, the suit itself seemed to be hard to see out of and harder to move in. So in terms of danger, I don't believe Mr. Wickles, would have actually murdered the kids. It would have brought too much suspicion to the museum. But then again, telling random people that there is a haunted suit of armor that comes to life on a full moon probably wasn't the best ploy to minimize suspicion. Either way, I'm giving him a 3 out of 5. The museum is the first location in the entire Scooby-Doo franchise, and much like the design of the Black Knight, I think it does a pretty safe yet slightly generic job for the series. I do like the idea of a haunted museum or any place of higher education. There have been many spooky reports that have taken place in these kind of places, and a museum filled with ancient relics from different cultures is ripe with potential for a good haunt. However, nothing in the museum is really all that scary other than the Black Knight. There are some neat sets and gags, but for the most part, the museum is fairly bland when compared to future locations. So I give the Country Museum a 2 out of 5. The Black Knight really sets the baseline standard for Scooby-Doo monsters. It does everything it needs to do for the first boss of the show without going over the top. It's just a haunted suit of armor, and I think that's pretty cool. The inspiration for using a suit of haunted armor might come from the stories of the Black Knight, which is a common antagonistic character throughout English folklore, showing up in stories like King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Since the suit came from England, perhaps it's the actual Black Knight armor from the King Arthur legends. It is fitting that the antagonistic Black Knight from Legends would also be an antagonistic ghost here. However, at the end of the day, the Black Knight is just a suit of armor. Despite that it's one of the more well-known Scooby monsters, there really isn't anything that unique in its design. The Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed movie did a better job at making this guy more menacing, giving him a ghostly green mist, and more distinguished armor and a sword. The Black Knight could have used a little of the creativity that was used later in the series, He also lacks in the scare factor department, but I have to give him some points for creating the standard formula that future monsters adhere to. So I give him a 3 out of 5. That's 8 points, placing the Black Knight in the C tier. Next up is the Vasquez Phantom, or also simply known as the Phantom. This sheet-wearing antagonist haunts a spooky castle in the second episode of Scooby-Doo Where Are You? Hassle in the Castle. Now, a little bit of trivia for you guys. This actually might have been the second episode of Scooby-Doo, or at least not originally. You see, A Clue for Scooby-Doo and What a Night for a Night both have unique illustrations for the title card, and this episode has just a standard title card that is used throughout the rest of the series, where the gang are running and it just shows a title above. It's very possible that originally A Clue for Scooby-Doo was the second episode, or might have even been the first episode. I don't know about you guys, but when I was a kid, this episode and A Night of Frights Is No Delight seemed to be the only Scooby-Doo episodes that they would run Wednesday mornings on Cartoon Network. This episode is what I think about when I think of the original series, and is probably the episode I am the most familiar with. So the gang decide to take a pleasure cruise on their boat, no doubt a luxury item courtesy of Daphne Blake's wealthy father. She may be clumsy, easily kidnapped, and overall dangerous to be around, but she also literally finances the gang's carefree mystery-solving adventures. Mr. Blake might also be why they haven't been placed in prison for all the trespassing, vandalism, assault, battery, while Shaggy makes himself a super Shaggy sandwich.
My favorite, a double triple-decker sardine and marshmallow fudge sandwich. Open the mouth, between the gums. Look out, stomach, here it comes.
A thick fog encompasses the vessel, forcing them to be grounded on Haunted Isle, and I thought Tom Hanks had it bad, but the mystery gang are not alone. A transparent, intangible phantom calls this island home, and took up residence in the spooky pirate castle nearby. This phantom was actually just a magician called Bluestone the Great. Bluestone managed to become a wanted criminal in 7 states, and decided it was best to live on a deserted island instead of going to prison. Hopefully he just scammed old ladies out of their income checks, because I don't know what he could have done to been wanted in 7 states. He utilized his magician tricks to make his phantom disguise walk through walls and float, which convinced the mystery gang for a hot minute that there was a real ghost. But of course, the gang managed to catch him with one of Fred's booby traps. A running gag, usually tripped by Scooby, yet somehow still catches the villain. This episode is the first and one of the best examples for how much the atmosphere and location made such a huge impact on an otherwise mediocre monster. The Haunted Isle is as much a character as the rest of the gang, and honestly way spookier than the Phantom. It's literally called the Haunted Isle by the locals. The castle has some of the best illustrations in the series, which is saying something. All the rooms have this gorgeous intricate detail and cool blue and greens that capture this sense of eeriness well. This episode also goes out of its way to build up some of the world's lore for the Haunted Isle, which again allows the setting to really stand out. The talking skull is one of my favorite gags in the whole series, and I'm convinced that this was actually not Bluestone's doing.
Which way did they go?
They went that way.
Oh, thanks, man.
It's all right.
Like, wow, a talking skull. Like, wow.
I'm pretty sure that's just a real haunted skull. Also, this is the first time we see Daphne fall through a trap door or otherwise become separated from the group, another running gag in the series. This is also one of the first examples of how these locations look relatively small outside, yet somehow the gang are always getting separated from each other and can't hear the other's screams. Must be like Time Lord physics. This is one of those few locations in Scooby-Doo that I genuinely could believe is haunted. And I'm not the only one, because again, it's called Haunted Isle. I'm pretty sure Bluestone wasn't always living here. And much like the Black Knight before setting the standard formula for monsters, the Haunted Isle definitely raised the bar for location and the aesthetic for future episodes. So I must give it a 5 out of 5. As for the Phantom's overall design is that of a literal sheet ghost, the most bottom of the creative barrel, and yet somehow it works. The Haunted Isle does a lot of heavy lifting to turn this simple ghost into a memorable character, but not everything about the Phantom is generic. The slight transparency and the crazy unhinged cackle make this design work, But the Phantom also stands out as really the only ghost in the series that acts like a true ghost, using sleight of hand tricks and illusions like walking through walls and floating. Despite that I love the Vasquez Phantom, I don't really think its design can compare to others later on this list. So for now, I'm giving it a 3 out of 5. It's great for what it is, but at the end of the day, it's just a sheet ghost. Despite how intimidating this guy is, he never really seemed to want to hurt the kids, just scare them off the island. The fact that he uses illusions to chase the kids around means that he couldn't even do anything if he caught them. Also, there are a couple of things that really break the immersion that he's a real ghost. In the opening, we, the audience, get to see him using a telescope while in full getup, which is not something that a ghost would typically do. Also, I hate to say this, despite how much I love the Phantom's cackling, he is very chatty for a ghost. It's harder to believe that a ghost talking like a normal person is a ghost, rather than if they just didn't talk. So for threat level, I have to rank him in a very low 1 out of 5. That's a total of 9 points, placing him in the C tier, right in front of the Black Knight. Did you know that the Phantom shows up in Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights, but is the only enemy in the entire game that cannot be killed? This is a throwback to the idea that the original Phantom in Hassle in the Castle wasn't real either. It was just an illusion. And so much like the Phantom in Hassle in the Castle, you can't harm this one either. Anyways, moving on. Up next is the Ghost of Captain Cutler from A Clue for Scooby-Doo. While enjoying a late-night beach party, the festivities are cut short when a ghostly diver rises out of the ocean.
Zoinks! A seagoing ghost!
The mystery gang retreat back to the malt shop to read the newspaper, where they find that the ghost diver was the ghost of Captain Cutler, who supposedly lost his life when a yacht sank his ship. Now he returns, seeking revenge on expensive yachts by stealing them. This episode is what I would consider the first real Scooby-Doo episode, or rather, the first time that the series would perfect its formula. What a Night for a Night laid the blueprint for how these monsters would be handled. Hassle in the Castle perfected the creepy aesthetic and fleshed out the potential of the haunted locations. A Clue for Scooby-Doo does both perfectly. It's a great episode with some decent mystery building up to the reveal of the Ghost of Captain Cutler. Spoilers, the Ghost of Captain Cutler was Captain Cutler himself, which also marks the first time, and really the only time I can think of, where a villain fakes their own death and disguises themselves as their own ghost. And the Ghost of Mr. Hyde doesn't count. It's a solid plot with a nice twist at the end, but there are also enough red herrings to throw the audience off in the form of Ebenezer Shark and Mrs. Cutler. The fabled malt shop also makes its splendid debut in this episode, and becomes one of the only, actually, it might be the only consistent landmark in the original series. Shaggy's bizarre culinary cravings are also introduced in this episode as well.
Yeah, man, I can already taste those chocolate-covered hot dogs.
Yuck! His stomach must be made of scrap iron.
The main location the episode takes place in is called the Graveyard of Ships, which is an underwater graveyard full of sunken ships. I wonder if Skull Island, Colonel Sanders' mansion, and the Haunted Isle are all in the same part of the ocean. Can you imagine if all these locations were just right next to each other? It'd be like the haunted version of the New World from One Piece. This area alone is a mystery. Forget Captain Cutler. Why have all these ships just ended up here? Like, it's literally called the Graveyard of Ships. This is a place where hundreds of people died and their ships sank. Kind of like a mini Bermuda Triangle. I really can't imagine many settings in Scooby-Doo that are more terrifying than being in an underwater graveyard full of sunken ships. Just a history of death and thinking about people's last moments as they drowned sinking below. You could definitely see a place like this having a huge amount of sinister energy surrounding it. And just like the Haunted Isle, if someone told me that the Graveyard of Ships was actually haunted, I would 100% believe it. So this location is a solid 5 out of 5. It may be the top scariest location in the original series. Something really neat about this episode is they used a water mask to emulate the idea of being underwater. Obviously today, doing this would be easy with digital effects, but back then, I can't imagine exactly how they would do this. They probably had a water tactile acrylic plate and would just pass it along the canvas. Either way, it's a really cool effect, and it's something unique about this episode that really isn't used in the rest of the series. Captain Cutler ran a yacht stealing business with his wife, and while he never actually harmed any of the gang, He did lock Fred, Daphne, and Velma underwater, which would have eventually made them run out of oxygen, killing them. He had access to an entire room full of oxygen tanks, so he could simply just stay down here forever and wait for the gang to suffocate. Because of the scope of his operations, I definitely could see the ghost of Captain Cutler killing the gang and making it look like they just disappeared in a scuba accident. If a bunch of kids on a boat disappeared around an area that is known for ships disappearing, I don't think anyone would bat an eye at it. So for danger level, I have to give him a 5 out of 5. I love everything about this design, and in my opinion, it still holds up to this day. There is just something about these old diving suits that is creepy as hell. The idea of using one of these diving suits really makes him stand out from the vast majority of ghosts and ghouls in the series. Going with a ghost diver allows the show to tap into thalassophobia, which is the fear of large bodies of water and not knowing what lurks beneath them. This already makes Captain Cutler's ghost way more terrifying than the vast majority of monsters on this list, because he's the only one who haunts underwater. But also, these suits were used when exploring the ocean was still very mysterious and unknown. Obviously, today there's more refined ways of exploring the ocean, but back then, the easiest way and the most, efficient way is to just take a person in a really heavy metal suit and just lower them into the ocean. This guy also has one of the most haunting moans in all of the Scooby-Doo franchise, which is no small feat. It sounds like a demonic whale call. There are a handful of water monsters in Scooby-Doo, but in my opinion, the Ghost of Captain Cutler is one of the best. So for design, I'm giving him a solid 5 out of 5, making the Ghost of Captain Cutler S tier number 1 with 15 points. Moving on, we take a break from the coast and find ourselves smack dab in the middle of a western ghost town with the Miner 49er. From Mind Your Own Business. While getting lost, the gang find a spooky ghost town in the middle of nowhere called Gold City. Despite the town being devoid of life, the gang find the Gold City Guest Ranch, which somehow is still up for business. Ran by the jolly green giant called Big Ben, the gang decide to spend the night, but the ranch's elderly caretaker, Old Hank, has stories to tell and lets the gang in on the local monster, the Miner 49er.
49er?
Of course, this wets the lips of these teenage sleuths and soon-to-be elder abusers. The Miner 49er is supposedly over 100 years old. He came to Gold City in 1849 and can't die until he finds all the gold in the city mines. In reality, it was just Old Hank, the caretaker of the Gold City Guest Ranch. Old Hank found out that the land held untapped crude oil and devised a plan to scare away what little business was left in the town, so that he could buy the land for nothing. Get used to that plot, because it happens a lot. He would map out the tunnels, making a recording of the mines moaning. Honestly, it's kind of cute and also kind of sad seeing an elderly man trying to scare people away so that he can buy an entire town. Himself, he looks like he was born in 1849. This episode isn't horrible, but it also fails in a couple of areas. For one, the monster is clearly just Old Hank, and the episode really doesn't try to hide this. He literally just wore a hat and a beard, and it's the exact same clothes he was wearing the whole time. I do like the old Western style aesthetic, but honestly, I feel like the episode could have utilized it a bit better. We don't linger too long in the ghost town part, and I feel like it was a missed opportunity to show how quickly the residents left. It's implied that this ghost town did have business in it prior to the Miner 49er, so most likely it was a tourist town, taking advantage of the ghost town aesthetic. Showing some clothes or personal items scattered about really could have added just how quickly people left. The mine, on the other hand, is a serviceable but yet very bland location. There's nothing but rock, and more rock. It's not the worst location, and there are a few neat gags I like the minecart chase and the peekaboo doors, but it really does pale in comparison to other locations on this list. So I'm going to give it 2 out of 5. One thing I did like about this episode was how the miner really wasn't supposed to be a ghost necessarily. He's just a supernaturally long-lived miner who really likes gold. Unfortunately, he wasn't much of a threat to the gang. Scooby-Doo Monsters Unleashed made him way more threatening by giving him fire breath and a pickaxe. But at the end of the day, masked or not masked, he's just an old guy. So for threat level, he gets a 1 out of 5. Standing at like 7 feet tall, he was a giant. These are just still to use, but still, The miner's costume is very simple yet pretty effective. He had a huge beard and a hat which hid his face. Despite how bland this guy looks, he's actually quite memorable. At least to me he is. I really did like this guy when I was a kid, but as an adult, objectively looking at it, his design really isn't that interesting when compared to others on this list. I think the lore behind his origin does the heavy lifting for the scare factor here. Seeing the minor 49er without context, I would just assume he was a tall, unkempt old man. I think for now, I'm going to have to give him a 2 out of 5 for design, which makes him 5 points, placing the Ancient Prospector in the E tier. Oof. But don't worry, he won't be alone for long. The first part of Season 1 was very dicey with more misses than hits, being very experimental and not very consistent with the same kind of tone and mood. The Scooby-Doo Where Are You series would start to pick up its pace in the later half of the first season, which really just start banging out home runs. One of the worst offenders of these experimental episodes, and also probably my least favorite Scooby-Doo episode ever, is a decoy for a dog napper. So I know I said that a clue for Scooby-Doo kind of perfected the formula for the series. Well, I don't think the showrunners thought so, because this episode felt way more like a movie serial or a Hardy Boy mystery than a Scooby-Doo mystery. Granted, there is a monster, but this guy is one of the few monsters that is very blatantly just a guy in a mask. The entire concept for this episode was actually done way better later on in the Scooby-Doo show, in the episode A Bum Steer for Scooby. It's pretty much the exact same premise and everything, even down to the same looking design for the monster. Anyways, back to this episode. While walking alone in broad daylight, Scooby-Doo tries to rizz up a poodle. Seriously, Scoob, a poodle? But out of nowhere, Scooby's future love interest is snatched away. Scooby then has to locate the gang, and judging by the scene where it's daytime and then this scene where it's nighttime, Scooby must have been running for hours. Like, why is the gang at the beach without Scooby? Did they even know what Scooby was doing? Did they care? Also, this is one of the few episodes to have a day scene in it, which is another reason why this episode is so strange. A man named Buckmaster's dog napped the competition in a dog show, so only his dog would be left to be the winner. To make it convincing, he kidnapped his own dog and put out a reward for his return. Then at the last minute, he was going to have his dog return to claim the prize. Out of all the plots and schemes of these villains, I think this one may be the worst. But then again, we still have the Apeman, so he used an old Native American village to hide the dogs while masquerading as the spirit of a Native American medicine man to scare off anyone from visiting the landmark. Yeah, this episode uses some pretty dated stereotypes to portray Native Americans, but it was also the 60s and a product of its time, so I try not to hold it against the show. If anything, it just makes me dislike this episode more. He only needed to kidnap one more dog for his plans to work, Big Red. Only this time it was Scooby-Doo standing in for the real Big Red. Like I said, it is blatantly obvious that this guy is just a guy. He kidnaps Scooby and takes him back to his little hideout, and this happens.
Huh? Gee, boss, he was right where you said he'd be.
Get this phony decoy out of here.
But what'll I do with him?
Give him a ride down the mountain on the old hand car. By the time it stops, he'll be 20 miles away.
Come on, back in the crate.
Like his henchman even calls him boss. It's clearly the voice of Buckmasters, and at this point, why not just use a normal mask? The henchman doesn't have a monster suit, so right off the bat, this guy's threat level is like a 1 out of 5. Any kind of threat was thrown out the window the moment he says,
So you got Miller's Great Dane. Good work, Mike.
In terms of the design, his overall look is memorable, but that's most likely due to him being one of the monsters in the intro. I do have a soft spot for masks, and this mask is pretty cool, but the Witch Doctor later in the series does this look far better and is a far better villain. Other than the mask, his design is just a guy in a tan suit, so for design, I have to give him a 2 out of 5. The ancient village in the cliffs is definitely unique compared to a lot of locations in the show. However, like I said before, it was very clear that this was a non-supernatural threat by all the dog food and modern items sprawled throughout. I give it 2 out of 5, placing the ancient medicine man in the E tier with his buddies. Though I will say I think I would put him below the Minor 49er because the Minor 49er had a pretty cool backstory. This guy is just some guy in a mask. I mean, at least old Hank tried, okay? We gotta give him points for that. I think he needs to have this win. A little bit of trivia for you guys. This was the first episode that Shaggy ever ate a Scooby snack. The ghost of Geronimo does show up in the game Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights, but for whatever reason, there are only 2 of them in the entire game, and they are both located in the hallway inside Clamorton Manor Part 4. The Mystery Machine in this episode is decked out with radars and computers, easily thousands of dollars worth of equipment that is never seen again in any future episodes. Originally, in this episode, it was supposed to be revealed that Shaggy and Velma were related, or even siblings. Considering Mystery Incorporated, that could have been very awkward. Moving on. Next we have the ghost of Elias Kingston from What the Hex is Going On? This episode was heavily inspired by the 1966 Gothic soap opera called Dark Shadows. Dark Shadows was very popular, especially with teens during the creation of Scooby-Doo. So it's only natural that Scooby-Doo made an episode influenced by the series. The Kingston Manor is nearly identical to the Collinwood Mansion, and even Elias Kingston himself is directly inspired by the 200-year-old vampire in the show, called Barnabas Collins. Honestly, they should have just made the ghost of Elias Kingston a vampire instead. It would have made way more sense, and also would have made the homage to Barnabas Collins complete. I love seeing little pieces of other works of horror in Scooby-Doo. The series was way before the internet, or even a lot of modern day horror icons, so seeing Scooby-Doo take inspiration from this era of horror is really cool to see. It also just shows how the creators really did their homework with this series. Anyways, now this episode is a very important episode to the Scooby-Doo franchise, and to a lot of people, it's one of the prime examples when it comes to what Scooby-Doo is known for. More specifically, the haunted house settings. This is the first time a legitimate haunted house location is ever used, and the Kingston Manor is the haunted house most people remember. This is because it's shown in every episode of the first season in the intro. I personally think this episode is one of the weaker episodes and falls under the category of being somewhat experimental, yet more adhering to the same rules that the series is known for than a lot of the earlier episodes. We will talk more about the Kingston Manor later, but for now, let's dive into the episode. The gang would often have these one-time family members or friends that would be used to push the plot, but then would never be seen again. Something that happens a lot later in the Scooby-Doo series, the Scooby-Doo show. Pretty much every episode was driven by a friend of theirs somewhere in the world having an issue, and then them also just happening to visit them for a completely different reason, but then also getting involved in a mystery. It's funny because I feel like the gang have probably solved mysteries for every single one of their relatives. It's weird because they are literally known for solving mysteries, and yet they have friends that live in like China and Ireland. The gang travel to these places for completely unrelated reasons. And while they're like, oh yeah, by the way, guys, we have a ghost. I don't know what to do about it. It's like, oh, well, you should have just called us sooner. Anyway. Sharon is supposed to be one of the gang's longtime friends, but she only shows up in this episode, and that's it. While driving to Sharon to spend a weekend at her family mansion, the gang witness a man walking into a decrepit-looking manor. It's funny because they make this out to be really strange that a man would walk inside of an old rundown mansion, but then literally the next scene, the gang are walking inside of the Weatherby mansion, which actually looks worse. It must be a thing in Scooby-Doo universe that a mansion equals rundown haunted house, because every single house in the series looks like it's haunted. It's revealed that strange things have been happening around the Weatherby Manor, and Sharon's Uncle Stuart is missing. Uncle Stuart is actually the one the gang saw walking into the Kingston Manor, but it turns out that Uncle Stu is actually the ghost of Elias Kingston. So why was he acting like this? Like he was in a trance and started walking to the Kingston home? Did he know the Mystery Machine was going to be passing by? Or did he just do this whenever he heard a car coming? I mean, he had to have timed it just right for somebody who knew the Weatherbys to then go to the Weatherbys and say, hey, we saw Uncle Stuart walking into this weird house. Who knows? Anyway, the gang and the Weatherbys go back to the Kingston Manor to check it out and find...
You know, there's no sign of him anywhere.
Look, someone's in the shadows. Uncle Stuart!
He's become an old man.
Now, I'm not going to lie, this part actually freaked me out when I was a kid. Like the idea of someone you know going missing and then showing up later as aged like 40 or 50 years. That's pretty scary. They take Stu back to the Weatherby home where he reveals to them that the ghost of Elias Kingston was responsible and forced him to enter the Kingston Manor where he was cursed to grow old unless the Weatherbys give up their fortune to the ghost by morning. So why does a ghost need money? Why is the ghost entitled to this money? Also, what money? Bro, have you seen their house? Elias Kingston is an interesting villain, and I think there was a lot of potential here. He was the first of this monster type, and in a lot of ways, the prototype for future monsters like the Ghost of Hyde and the Creeper. The most notable thing about him is he is one of the few monsters that talks, and boy, does he not shut up.
Ah, good! You brought the fortune. How fortunate for you! Run! 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 How did that get here? Let me out of here!
He also shows up in the Scooby-Doo intro, but I'm going to be honest with you, his design in the intro is actually better than the actual episode. It's very bland. He looks like a normal dude with blue face paint and a dress coat. The coolest thing about him was his supposed ability to age people, but he really doesn't do that other than Uncle Stuart. I think it would have been interesting if maybe he kidnapped Sharon and somehow convinced the gang that he was aging Sharon up as well, but he doesn't do that either. Also, maybe instead of speaking directly to the gang, they could have pulled a card from the Phantom's shadow and left messages written on mirrors or even in the walls. But instead, he is a chatterbox that really doesn't try to act intimidating or ghostly at all. In terms of danger, other than kidnapping, he did lock the gang in a mausoleum. However, unlike the ghost of Captain Cutler, the gang wouldn't have died and probably would have just found their way out like they wound up doing. I really don't think that Uncle Stuart would have wanted a murder investigation in this. He really just wanted to get that money as quick and precise as possible. And by the way, there's a scene where he literally walks up to the gang, puts his hands on Shaggy's shoulder, and tells them to bring his money by morning, and then scuffles off. Now, usually the gang already are convinced that the monster is fake or the ghost is a guy in a mask. So they literally could have just all tackled him right here if they suspected he was fake. And he doesn't really have any weapons or any way to fight back. He just better hope that the gang doesn't tackle him. For design, he gets a 2 out of 5. And for threat level, I have to give him a 1 out of 5. One saving grace in this episode is the Kingston Manor. This is one of the first major haunted houses in the series, and it's pretty iconic. I definitely think that there are far better haunted houses later on, but there are a couple of things to appreciate here. There's a gag where Shaggy wears rollerblades, which is pretty funny, and the secret bookshelves is a staple of the franchise. One of the things I do appreciate about the Kingston Manor is, much like the Haunted Isle, the art really does sell that this is a elaborated haunted building, and I really appreciate how much detail goes into some of these rooms. I do think this is probably the start of when the art for Scooby-Doo became more consistent, with the backgrounds playing a major part in the monsters and their threat. It's just a shame that this setting couldn't have a better monster in it because it would have been really cool. The gang also investigate a Swami shop after finding a fortune-telling book within the mausoleum. This Swami shop also has some nice gags in it, like Scooby dressing up as a Swami and Shaggy using his ventriloquism to speak through Scooby. Always nice to see Shaggy use his quirky abilities. The crystal ball and table chase the gang around, which is another cool little gag, but it does this with a small fan on the bottom, and the crystal ball actually turns out to be a closed-circuit TV, which Elias Kingston talks through. Elias Kingston's out here in the 1960s putting modern-age drones to shame. Overall, the locations really pull this episode out of being one of the worst episodes. So for the location, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. But unfortunately, it's not enough to move Elias Kingston any higher than the D tier. But at least he beats out the Ghost of Geronimo, and that is sadly not the case for the next monster on this list, which may be the worst one in the entire series, and that is the Apeman from Never Ape an Apeman. Oh boy! So the gang go to Hollywood to help Daphne's film directing Uncle John as extras in his movie, The Apeman of Forbidden Mountain. The titular Apeman shows up, but this Apeman is not the Apeman that was supposed to be in this scene. This Apeman also tries to sabotage the bridge scene with the actress Candy. Apparently, the Apeman has been doing this for a while, and good Uncle John conveniently forgets to bring this up to the gang before asking them to be in his movie. Not that they would have said no or anything, but still, I mean, you at least should tell people that the movie is being sabotaged. Scooby-Doo intervenes for the first time in the entire franchise and 1v1s the Apeman with an
Another epic victory! Big win!
Scooby literally beats the crap out of this so-called monster and does the job that the studio security team should be doing. So Uncle John is like, wait, where's Carl the stuntman that was supposed to be in the Apeman suit? Well, they find Carl in a trunk, and would you look at that? He has the Apeman suit on. Guess that wraps up this mystery. He claims that the real Apeman threw him into the trunk and took his place.
What happened? I came in to dress, and a big hairy animal grabbed me and threw me in the trunk.
Which, I gotta be honest, it may be the worst excuse any of these villains ever made in any Scooby-Doo show. So there's a number of ways to deal with this Apeman problem. For one, just call the police. And if you don't call the police, then two, at least have a decent security team. And three, just mark the costume so that way when you see it, you'll know it's the same costume that Carl's wearing. I mean, it's just a gorilla suit. It's the exact same suit as the one used in the movie, so I'm not sure why they didn't just tackle him and unmask him right away. Like, they all have to know it's a suit, right? Hollywood suits are good, but not that good. So Candy walks in and quits until the studio finds and captures or gets rid of or whatever to this monster that's haunting the place. And also, Carl quits. So Uncle John is like, well, that's that. The only two actors working on the movie are gone, so I guess the movie's canceled. I don't think that's how contracts work. But also, are these the only two actors in the whole movie? Like, you can't get anyone else to replace a stuntman and the lead female actor? So after running around the sets looking for clues, Shaggy manages to snag a picture of the Apeman without his mask on. And would you believe it?
It's Carl, the stuntman!
You don't even need his picture, Shaggy. You already know the monster is fake because he took his mask off. Just have the rest of the gang and Uncle John and whoever else is, I guess, hanging around the studio, tackle him. Anyways, Carl wanted to get the movie canceled because he wanted to be made the lead actor. Bro, you were! It's called the Apeman of Forbidden Mountain, not Cave Woman of Forbidden Mountain. As stupid and contrived as Buckmaster's plan was, at the very least it made some sort of sense. Carl literally screwed himself out of a great movie deal. Like, imagine if the directors saw how ferocious his Apeman was and made an entire franchise out of it. This episode is the bottom of the barrel for everything Scooby-Doo related. The plot is bad, there is no mystery really. The only suspect is Carl. The gang see Carl in full Apeman gear minus the mask, and yet the episode still continues. The idea that a film studio relies on a group of teens to save their presumably $1 million film is outrageous, and also the fact that these actors can just go home because they are scared. Now, I'm not saying that they should risk their lives, but it's the studio's job to take care of this situation. So the whole plot is a complete mess, and the monster's design is horrible. It's pretty bad. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this guy is going really low on this list. First off, he's not a ghost. He's not even a monster, really. He is just a feral gorilla. There's really nothing unique in this design at all. It's just a gorilla suit, and that's it. At the very least, Carl could have changed the suit a little, but he literally uses the exact same suit that was given to him by the studio, and he thinks that was enough. So the Apeman design gets the lowest ranking of 1 out of 5. Now, as for danger level, like I said, Scooby was not even scared of him. He literally beats him up. And true, he did rock the bridge that would have possibly harmed the actress in the movie. I doubt that he would want murder on his hands. He would more than likely just wanted to scare her into quitting the film, which he did succeed in doing, by the way. I don't see him as a threat at all since he was actually scared of Scooby-Doo and backed off. So again, I have to give him a 1 out of 5. Now there's the setting. Well, the setting is literally just a movie set, and not really a creepy one or anything. It's just a movie set and that's it. So reason why this isn't all that scary is because all the props like the haunted house and the mountains and every other prop they show, they are purposely made to look that way. So there isn't any legitimacy in them. I just really don't understand why they picked a gorilla to haunt a movie theater. It's a very weird thing. I feel like if it was a zoo setting, it would make more sense, but why a gorilla? I don't understand. But anyway, the movie studio is just a studio, and it's got some interesting props, like this a bunch of stairs that can go up, and there's like a secret room underneath it. But like I said, this is all manufactured by the studio. It's nothing that's real. Apparently there was a haunted studio or haunted house that was on this site prior to them building the set, and I think that is supposed to be responsible for the gorilla coming back. I don't know. I don't even know if it's supposed to be a ghost anymore. But anyway, the setting is not good at all. So unfortunately, I'm going to give the setting a 1 out of 5 as well, making the Apeman the first F-tier monster. Seriously, a good security team would have taken care of this guy. Next is the Funland Robot from Foul Play in Funland. The gang stumble into this mystery when an amusement park called Funland randomly starts up for business. And what luck, the teenage sleuths just so happen to be clam hunting on the beach right beside the park. But things get strange when the empty park seems to be operating on its own, and a mysterious man with super strength starts popping up everywhere. Foul Play in Funland is one of the earlier Scooby-Doo episodes that was clearly experimental from the rest of the series. Unlike most standard episodes, there are sci-fi elements, and for the first time, the monster, or in this case a robot, is real. But also for the first time, the monster in question is not evil or even malicious. It's just a short-circuiting robot. For the first half, there is a nice mystery being built up to whom this person is. Also, this is one of the only times that Scooby tries to sniff out the villain.
Come on, Scooby, pick up the scent.
No scent.
No scent? He has to have a scent. Why, he'd have to be a ghost not to leave a scent. Did I say ghost?
So that means that Scooby could have smelled out the villains this whole time and didn't. An interesting ability that would have solved 99% of the gang's mysteries, but whatever. The gang find a creepy house nearby and talk to the owners, Mr. Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins lives with his sister, Sarah Jenkins, and they both take care of the park, and it's down season. Not sure why they didn't just make these two husband and wife instead of siblings. Seems odd, but then again, cartoons back then tried to stay away from showing intimacy, so perhaps that's the reason. So the gang try to tell the Jenkins what's going on, and I love how they just dismiss everything. Like, it's very rude.
Character running around out there.
He was like weirdo.
Hero right.
Fiddlesticks. Besides us, there's no one else on this island.
Maybe the moonlight was playing tricks on you.
After chasing the Torpedo Man around the park and through many of the rides, Fred comes up with a foolproof plan to use a turbocharged bumper car to catch the Torpedo Man, which leads to one of the best gags in the entire series. They get Velma, the worst possible person to drive the bumper car. And of course, Velma loses her glasses and Scooby freaks out. The gang only find out that this is no mortal man when one of Fred's traps completely fail to capture him, and the android literally just walks through the walls of the trap, which baffles the gang. This is a nice touch and one of the first times the gang feel somewhat defeated. That's when Mr. Jenkins pops up and reveals that the Torpedo Man is a robot named Charlie. After trying to stop Charlie with a giant magnet, Sarah Jenkins sabotages the device, making Charlie go haywire. She did this because she believed that robots shouldn't replace the human touch with children. So instead of talking to her brother about maybe not building an indestructible automaton, she decided to sabotage her brother's hard work and make Charlie go crazy. I respect her forethinking when it comes to the human element in these things, but her careless actions could have easily got someone killed. In the end, Charlie is used around the Jenkins home, and for once, the episode has a happy ending. This episode really does feel out of place for a Scooby-Doo plot. The Funland Park is a standout location in the series, but lacks the spooky aesthetic the show is known for. The bright park lights, colorful rides, and upbeat music make the Funland amusement park feel somewhat awkward compared to the threat of Charlie. Still, a self-operating amusement park with no one working there would definitely give me the heebie-jeebies. Add in a strange man running around with super strength, and despite the departure from the rest of the series, the Funland does manage to be an enjoyable and mysterious setting. So I give it a 3 out of 5. Despite that the Funland Robot wasn't a true Scooby villain, it may very well be the most dangerous monster in the original show. Charlie had super strength, super speed, and complete control of the Funland Park, and he didn't have a moral compass. Even though the robot didn't harm anyone, considering that he was malfunctioning, he easily could have. But despite how dangerous Charlie was, the gang could have simply left the park, and I doubt Charlie would have followed. So for his threat level, I'm going to go with a 4 out of 5. In terms of design, his design is somewhat basic, which does fit the robotic aesthetic at the time. The 60s and 50s saw a huge explosion in sci-fi media, and robots were still very humanoid or box-shaped. Charlie looks completely human other than his face, which is the only real saving grace here. It does have this creepy blank design, but honestly I think there are way better robot designs later in the franchise. So while definitely a memorable villain for breaking the norms and certainly not a bad design, it's definitely not the best. So I'll give it a 2 out of 5 with a total of 9 points, placing the Funland Robot into the C tier. Next up, we have the Puppet Master from Backstage Rage. While walking home from the Pizza Palace, which is a location that is mentioned but never shown, which is a shame because it would have been nice to add another staple location like the malt shop to the verse. A black sedan goes by and a violin case falls out of the car. Shaggy and Scooby stumble upon the violin case, stuffed with money, and then Shaggy goes to call the rest of the gang while Scooby protects the case. The black sedan comes back and a realistic female dog puppet lures Scooby away from the case. Oh, come on, Scooby, you're better than that. Somehow the driver is able to get out of the car and pick up the violin case while also controlling the poodle puppet. So he bamboozles Scoobs and gets away with the money. When the rest of the gang arrive, they find a marionette controller which belongs to a puppeteer at the local theater called Pietro's Puppets. They all come to the conclusion that this has to be the work of
Counterfeiters!
So of course they have to investigate rather than call the police. They arrive at the Strand Theater to find a doorman playing with a puppet. He claims to be only a hobbyist, and the gang attempt to look around under the pretense that Scooby was a performing dog. Honestly, if a talking dog alone doesn't convince this man, then what is dancing going to do? Also, this guy is a doorman, right? Does he even have the power to give people auditions? After finding a $20 bill, the gang decide to GTF out of there, which isn't suspicious at all. Velma claims the bill is genuine, and so Fred thinks it was planted there to throw the gang off. I mean, sure, it was, but why did the doorman even try this? He acts like these high school students are police officers who got an anonymous tip or something. They have no right to search this property, and he could have just said, "Sorry, we are closed, a goodbye." Not that that would have stopped them from just breaking in anyway. Speaking of which, the gang come back later that night and find the doorman asleep and the door unlocked, so naturally, they entered the closed business without permission and proceed to tamper with private property. Seriously, I doubt that any charges would even stick considering the amount of tampering the gang would be responsible for. Anyway, in their search for the ever-vague clues, the gang have strange accidents like sandbags being cut or props falling over. It's not till Scooby and Shaggy find a costume room does the main villain of this arc reveal himself as the Puppet Master. This guy is quite possibly one of the best Scooby-Doo antagonists of all time, and it's all thanks to the build-up. Unlike previous Scooby-Doo monsters, which had a sort of campiness to them or were involved in a gag that diminished their threat, the Puppet Master is played in an unusually straight and intimidating way that Scooby villains are not really known for. The build-up to this guy is slow-paced and very well executed for a Scooby-Doo villain. Like when the gang try to wake up the doorman to find out that even he is a puppet.
Mr. Doorman, wake up! Wake up! Come on, wake up!
He's a puppet too!
That's all for me, fans. Hey, we're locked in, but good.
It's the first time that the whole gang feel this sense of dread that really hasn't been seen before. In a very rare scenario, the gang actually try to leave the place they came to investigate, and the villain is actually the one who won't let them. Talk about a plot twist. Most villains would do anything to get rid of these guys. True, the episode only gives one suspect, but that one suspect is now a puppet. So at the time watching this as a kid, I actually believed that the doorman was a puppet the whole time. Well, until the end anyways. The gang usually finds some information or lore about these monsters early on from the locals or even from the perpetrators themselves, but this guy shows up out of nowhere, and the gang are just as baffled as the audience as to who he is. He isn't even given a proper name in this episode. The name Puppet Master is a fan name that has since become official. His sinister presence is made all the more potent because he is one of the few monsters actively trying to kill the gang. Honestly, I think this episode is just as experimental as Foul Play and Funland because it really tests the opposite side of that spectrum. The use of puppets is also a really cool part about this guy, and it's basically his superpower. The reason why puppets are so creepy is because they are often created in the likeness of real things or people, but we know they are lifeless objects. so seeing a puppet move means an unknown force is behind it. It takes on a whole new sinister vibe because unlike most monsters in this series, this guy didn't have some corny far-fetched plan to buy land or scare people away. No, he wanted to kill the gang because
You have learned my secret. Now you can never go.
Like, bro, that's straight up terrifying. This unseen, cloaked criminal who has a mastery of puppets is trying to kill you inside of a closed theater. Honestly, it sounds like a good B-horror movie. So for the threat level, I give the Puppet Master a 5 out of 5. The Strand Theater feels very similar to the Country Museum and the Archaeology University. What really makes it stand out is the Puppet Master's mastery over the whole building. If any other monster operated here, I'd give it maybe a 3 or 2 out of 5. But because of the different stages, life-size puppets, and secret passages, the Puppet Master has control of all of that.
Like, just imagine going to an empty theater at night when it's closed, and you decide to go sit in the auditorium, and all of a sudden a play just starts up, like, specifically for you. Me personally, I think it's definitely more off-putting than a carnival running and no one being there, because carnivals run anyway, even if there's only a couple people in the carnival. It's still creepy to have a carnival with no one in it, for sure, but I think being in an abandoned theater is just, in my opinion, way more creepy. So for setting, I have to give it a 5 out of 5. Now on to the actual design of the guy. He wore what appeared to be an old-time English gentleman's cloak with a red interior and a black fedora hat. It gives me very Jack the Ripper vibes or Phantom of the Opera vibes, which is fitting considering that Phantom of the Opera takes place in an opera house, and this takes place in a theater. I think there was definitely inspiration taken from Phantom of the Opera. So if I were to judge just the design alone, I probably would only give it like a B or A. But I believe that the 2D design of the character is only one aspect of the character design. How the character acts and how the character sounds and talks goes into the design just as much. Think of it like the dialects from Doctor Who. Their design's basically a R2-D2 unit, but because they have such a unique, they have become very iconic. It's kind of the same with this guy. Him running around the theater saying, "You shall never leave," is terrifying. So for design, I'm giving him a 5 out of 5, being one of the few villains in Scooby-Doo to actively try to kill the gang. Considering that he was a counterfeiter and probably had a money laundering racket as well, I definitely can see why he would want to protect this operation. And yeah, murder doesn't seem like it'd be that far out of the scope of what he'd be willing to do. So the Puppet Master is again one of our S tiers. Adding up his points, he gets 15 points, which is a perfect score. But where in the S tier should he go? Well, I definitely don't think he is nearly as iconic as the ghost of Captain Cutler. So if I had a fourth category, it probably would be how iconic the character is or how popular the character is as well. While personally, I prefer the Puppet Master compared to Captain Cutler, I do think Captain Cutler is the more iconic villain, and so I'm going to keep him in the front for now.
Next, we have the Ghost Clown from Bedlam and the Big Top. The Ghost Clown haunted the Barnstorm Circus, sabotaging acts and in some cases even attempting to murder the performers. The Ghost Clown was an ex-circus performer himself called Harry the Hypnotist. Oh yeah, I guess I should mention this. The Ghost Clown straight up has superpowers. I'm not joking. He is legitimately a super villain. This is rare for the Scooby-Doo series, but there are a few monsters with powers or abilities or some kind of unique suits or gadgets that can make them have certain abilities. But out of all of them, I think the Ghost Clown is one of the most deadly. In fact, he may be the most deadly of all the original villains. So let's talk about this episode a bit. The gang are enjoying one of their many random drives when all of a sudden, a midget and a strong man riding a bike come out of nowhere. The two circus performers' bike mysteriously cuts in half, and they both crash. I'm not really sure if this was something that the Ghost Clown did prior to them riding the bike and they just now came into effect, or if he was implied to have done this while they were riding the bike. But if so, that means he has another power that just was never shown again. The gang check on the two and find that the performers, now ex-performers, left the Barnstorm Circus because it was
haunted. With those magic words, the gang head off to the circus, where one after another, they fall victim to the ghost clown's hypnotic powers. So I gotta be completely honest, I really don't care for the ghost clown all that much. He's definitely nowhere near my favorite of the Scooby-Doo villains, and I really don't like clowns as a villain type. I think it's really overused, but I have to give credit where credit's due. The ghost clown was one of the first killer clowns ever created, which is very cool for Scooby-Doo. Now, there could have been a couple inspirations behind the ghost clown. For instance, the movie The Phantom of the Big Tent, which involves killer clowns as well as a circus of death. And of course, the Joker from DC Comics could both very well be inspirations for the ghost clown. However, the majority of other killer clowns came after the 60s, and we'll definitely get to that later on, but for now, let's talk about the location a bit. I think it was only a matter of time before a circus was used in one of these episodes, but the thing is about circuses is they really weren't all that creepy at the time. If anything, I'd say the accidents that happen at circuses probably would creep people out more than the clowns at circuses, at least back then. Obviously, nowadays, people find circuses a little creepy due to pop culture and its overuse of killer clowns. Like, they literally made a movie about killer clowns from outer space that used a circus as a spaceship, so unlike an amusement park that is built on a permanent location, a circus can be set up anywhere, like in the middle of some creepy woods. So I definitely have to give credit to a circus for that. It can find any location and kind of make it creepy. Like, I do think it is creepy to randomly see a circus in the middle of the woods. It definitely does scream, yeah, please do not go here. Get away from this area. Also, certain things associated with a circus like lions, sword swallowers, fire breathers, and yes, even clowns are sometimes considered creepy or strange. You can deny it all you want, but objectively, clowns are creepy. And they go with the circus setting very well. So for the circus, I have to give it a 5 out of 5. It's made even more terrifying by the ghost clown because he is legit nightmare fuel. And like I said before, he is one of the first murder clowns in fiction, or at the very least one of the first that I have read about. He predates Pennywise, Art the Clown, and pretty much every other murder clown I can think of. Well, maybe except for the Joker. Bro is the OG. And so for design, I think it's pretty great. He doesn't really scream ghost as much as he does demon clown. The slight hunch and big shoes and baggy clothing make him very unsettling, to say the least. So I'm gonna have to give the design a 5 out of 5 for sure. Now for the threat level, as stated before, this guy legit has the power to manipulate and hypnotize anyone nearly instantly. He uses his hypnosis to great and deadly effect, forcing Scooby to perform trapeze or Daphne riding a unicycle atop elephants, but the most dangerous of these acts by far is when he hypnotized Shaggy into believing he was a lion tamer. Also, I should mention this, he can snap people out of the trance that he puts them in with a whistle, and then when they wake up, they forget everything they just did. So he tries to kill people in the most sick and horrendous ways, like forcing someone to climb into a lion cage, antagonizing a poor lion just so the lion will aggressively kill Shaggy after the spell is lifted. And yeah, that's straight up evil. Also, a really cool side effect of his powers is if he does use the hypnosis on you, you actually do gain the abilities or knowledge that he says you get. For instance, he actually winds up using it on himself and turns himself into a chimpanzee, and then he acts just like a chimpanzee. But I think it's really cool is that he actually did make Scooby walk the tightrope, and he actually made Shaggy a lion tamer, or gave Daphne the ability to ride a unicycle, which was stated by Shaggy that she probably couldn't and shouldn't be able to do, considering she can't ride a bicycle. Yeah, it's actually pretty cool just how powerful he is. So yeah, I mean, threat level, he's a solid 5 out of 5 for sure. I just think it's kind of funny because he got, like, Harry the Hypnotist got thrown in jail because he stole from the circus. And so the first thing he does when he gets out of jail is, because he went to jail because he committed the crime, he decides to go back to the circus and try to kill everybody with his superpower instead of using it for anything else at all. The Ghost Clown is going in the S tier. However, I don't think he is nearly as iconic as the ghost of Captain Cutler or as terrifying as the Puppet Master, but he definitely does fit in the dangerous category.
So that is where he will be staying for now. Next, we have the Monster Trio from A Gaggle of Galloping Ghosts. The Monster Trio haunted the Frankencastle, which was supposedly transported brick by brick from Transylvania, and along with it, the monsters inside. A master of disguise and criminal, Big Bob Oakley, heard of the treasure of Frankencastle and used his mastery of disguises to bring the legendary monsters to life to scare visitors away. To make doubly sure, he also disguised himself as a fortune teller so that he could warn people away from the castle before arriving. Also, this allowed him to keep a watch on the police, I'm sure. Somehow, Big Bob found a way to recreate the accident that gave Flash his powers, or he has Rick Sanchez's portal gun, because he is everywhere all the time. First, he is dressed as the werewolf seen in the opening, watching the Mystery Machine go down the road, and then he somehow gets back to the gypsy van and manages to dress up in full fortune teller outfit before the Mystery Machine arrive, and then warns the gang not to go to the castle, gets to the castle before they do, changes into his Dracula disguise, gives them another warning, and then turns into a bat, and then transforms into a monster and chases Daphne, and then interchanges between all these disguises while simultaneously going after everyone at once. This guy may very well be a superhuman as well. Like, have you ever seen just how long it takes to put makeup and masks on? Masks and prosthetics this advanced would take hours, if not a whole day alone. And he's just throwing them on and throwing them off in like seconds. Oh yeah, I also forgot to mention, apparently he started this whole fiasco in like one day because the caretaker of the castle just decided to abandon his post a day ago.
That's where we're going.
Not the castle. The caretaker ran away in fear today. I warn you, you will meet your doom if you go there.
So, man, this guy really gets work done. He should have been in Hollywood. So I'm going to rank these guys all together because technically they're all the same person, but I also want to rank them individually as well. So we're going to go ahead and tackle the design of these guys first. The Monster Trio are clearly representations of the Universal monsters, more specifically Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Wolfman. Their overall designs are pretty much a one-for-one copy of their Universal counterparts. Big Bob might have even been inspired by the legendary silent film actor Lon Chaney, who is known as the Man of a Thousand Faces, which would make this homage to the Universal Monsterverse complete. First we have Dracula. He is the first one to greet them at the castle and is the only one that speaks. So I think it's implied he is supposed to be the leader of the monsters. His design is nothing special. He looks like a cartoon version of the Bela Lugosi Dracula. So while the design is not bad, it's also not very original. He also really doesn't do much, which is probably an issue with 3 monsters competing for screen time of a 22-minute episode. His turning into a bat trick is the only thing really going for him, so for design I have to give him a 2 out of 5. Next we have Frankenstein's monster. Again, he looks like a cartoon version of the character from the Universal movies, played by Boris Karloff and later Glenn Strange. His most notable difference is the lack of neck screws, but that's pretty much it. So for the monster, I have to go with a 2 out of 5 as well. The werewolf is clearly the most unique of these 3, looking very different from the inspiration. I really like this design, and I still like it today, but again, it's nothing that special. I do think it's the strongest of the 3 though, so I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5. And I must not be the only one who thinks this either, because he was the only one of the 3 to be in the game Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights. Although, the game's gallery labels the Wolfman as the werewolf from Who's Scared of a Big Bad Werewolf. It's clearly the model from this episode. This was not the first time all 3 of these guys hanged out on screen, by the way. Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Wolfman first appeared together on screen in the 1944 movie House of Frankenstein, which connected previous monster movies into one universe. They would occasionally guest star in future installments in the Universal Monsterverse as well. One movie of particular note was the 1948 movie Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, in which Bud Abbott and Lou Costello, 2 well-known comedians at the time, joined forces with a reluctant werewolf to stop Count Dracula from reviving the Frankenstein monster. Abbott and Costello were known for their horror comedies, and may actually have helped inspire the horror comedy genre. Scooby-Doo definitely had comedic elements reminiscent of the Abbott and Costello formula. Anyways, now on to the Frankencastle. So personally, I really like this castle.
It's my favorite castle in the original series, beating out Haunted Isle by a very small margin. What I love most about this castle is the variety of different rooms and secrets. Like, they have a trapdoor everywhere. Since Big Bob just moved in here like a day ago and didn't have time to build all these sets and tunnels, I say this even though he clearly has super speed, that means all these secrets were built into the castle and then moved here brick by brick from Transylvania. There's even a morgue with trapdoors inside of the coffins, an Iron Maiden with a trapdoor, and even a weirder looking jukebox type thingy with a trapdoor. Who built this place and why? Overall, it has some of the best looking artwork and backgrounds in the series. So for setting, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 5 out of 5. For threat level, the ghostly ghouls were just one guy, so they all scale from Big Bob himself. He mostly just ran around trying to scare everyone away. He wanted to get this cloak with diamonds underneath it. He does actually get this cloak, by the way, but then he goes back to the fortune teller wagon and puts back on the fortune teller gear instead of just GTFOing out of there. He's also one of the few monsters that Scooby stands up against. While in his Dracula disguise, Scooby attacks him and drags him to a trapdoor. Also, while dressed as a werewolf, Scooby manages to get the werewolf to back away. So in my headcanon, I like to think that Scooby could smell that it was the same person, but I doubt that. Also, I think this is the last time that Shaggy performs ventriloquism in the entire series, which is a shame. Though despite Big Bob's superpowers of speed and makeup, he really wasn't much of a threat. So I must give him a 2 out of 5. I'll give him points for the hustle though, which puts Dracula at a 9, the monster at a 9, and the werewolf at a 9.5 respectively. Although including the fortune teller, I'm going to go ahead and give Big Bob Oakley a solid 10, which puts the monster trio in C tier as individuals and Big Bob in the B tier as a unit. Next we have the Mummy from Scooby-Doo and a Mummy 2. The Mummy of Anka was the disguise of Dr. Najib, an archaeologist obsessed with the treasure of Anka. He found a real Anka mummy and used it to bargain his way into the University of Archaeology so that he could find and use the ancient coin that was on exhibit there. Since he was the foremost authority on the mummy, he knew what the coin was for, and so he tried to use it real quick to get the hidden item inside of the hippo statue. He made up a curse that the mummy would come to life and turn anyone to stone in hopes of scaring away the gang so he could steal the coin. So he does fail in scaring them away. However, the gang decide to make a snack stop at the malt shop, giving Dr. Najib time to steal the coin. When he could not find it, he thought the professor had it, and so he decided to bring his curse to life. He kidnapped the professor and made it look like the professor was turned stone. In reality, he simply knocked the professor out and made a cast of him. I swear, some of these villains go to such extreme lengths to avoid murder, when it would be the most intimidating solution. I know it's a kid's show, but still, most of these guys' long-term plans are kidnap someone, scare people, and hope there's never a police investigation. Did you think the professor was going to come back and be like, "Oh, it's okay, Dr. Najib, I forgive you"? No, he's clearly going to go to the authorities. Like, you're going to have to kill him at some point. Anyways, he looks for the coin, but when he realizes the professor doesn't have it, he then thinks the gang have it. Which, yeah, they do, and this is why. So, Shaggy picks up the gold coin, and without gloves or anything, he just touches all over this priceless piece of history. And man, the 1970s must have been a real crazy time for antique museums, because this happens again later in the episode with Mr. Hyde. Not only did the professor forget Shaggy had this ancient coin, but it literally never crosses his mind that the coin is gone. And Shaggy somehow forgets he's holding an ancient Egyptian treasure and puts the coin in his pocket. But it gets even worse. He then tries to buy the sandwiches from the malt shop using the gold coin. Shaggy must have been so baked because he doesn't even realize he's giving it to the cashier. It was the cashier at the malt shop that calls him out on the coin, and only then does Shaggy remember that he had it.
Be $1.50. Here you are, $1.50 for a job well done. What kind of kooky 50-cent piece is this?
Hey, that's the old Egyptian coin.
Like, wow, I must have dropped it in my pocket by accident.
Shaggy be smoking that good stuff, thinking with his stomach, not his head. Like, seriously, sometimes everyone in this show had the attention span of a Gen Alpha scrolling through TikTok. So the gang returned back to the school to return the coin, only to find the professor has been turned to stone and the mummy is on the loose looking for the lost coin. This episode has a lot of similarities to What a Night for a Night, Even the settings are similar. One's a university and one's a museum. Even the monsters are very similar, with both of them, Mr. Wickles and Dr. Najib, just kind of throwing on a disguise haphazardly. Like, it wasn't their long-term plan to have these monster disguises. They kind of just improvised them on the spot. One of the key differences, though, is the Mummy is one of the few villains that actually was after the gang specifically, because they had the one thing that he needed to get his valuable treasure.
Your mummy's calling you. Oh, no sense of humor, huh?
Coin?
Okay, like here's a quarter.
I'll bet he means that old Egyptian coin.
Most of the time, these monsters just want the gang to go away, but this guy, he's like, nah, I need that coin, guys. I need it. Again, I really don't see why or how his master plan was going to work. Like, you're a respectable doctor in this field. You will have access to these relics, I'm sure. You don't have to do this. And then he throws the actual mummy behind some plants and just hopes it's good enough, like no one's gonna find it. There's going to be a police investigation. You're going to get found out. Even if you got away with this crime and you got your little gem, what are you going to do with it? You know, are you going to sell it? I just don't understand what his long-term plan here was. But at the very least, he's a really good sculptor because he was able to sculpt live statues of himself and the professor and even Scooby. And I don't think Scooby was ever casted, so good job, bud. So very similarly to the Black Knight, I think he probably would have had to kill the professor, but then again, maybe not. It's kind of unclear as to whether or not he was going to long-term, he lived in Egypt. Maybe he could just get on a plane and go back before any charges were filed against him. But then again, it's hard to say. I don't really think he would kill the professor, but he definitely would have had to if he was going to stay in the country. So I'm going to put a pin in that for now. The actual mummy suit did seem to give him some level of added strength, as he was able to easily blast through a glass window and punch through a wooden door. Also, he took hits directly from Scooby, the same hits that he used against the Apeman, so he didn't even flinch. I guess that means that power level wise, the mummy is above the Apeman. So with that in mind, and also the fact that he did kidnap the professor, I think I'm going to give him a 3 out of 5. I don't think he would have killed the gang. I think he just wanted the coin back. And I don't even know if he would have killed the professor. I think he probably would have just left him tied up and left the country. So yeah, 3 out of 5 is good enough, I think, for now. As for the actual mummy design, it's clear that this is another Universal-inspired monster, more specifically the Boris Karloff movie, The Mummy. I do like this mummy design, but honestly, it's only a generic mummy disguise and not that special when considering everything else on this list. It would have been really cool, I think, if they would have added some trinkets or some clothing on this mummy design other than just bandages. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to give it a 2 out of 5. The Archaeology University is very similar to the Country Museum in a lot of ways, so I think I'm gonna give it the same score as a 2 out of 5. With a total of 7 points, this puts The Mummy in the D tier. Next we have The Witch and Zombi from Which Witch is Which. After a failed fishing trip, the gang get lost and stop to ask directions from a stranger on the side of the road, which turns out to be a zombie. The gang GTFO out of there and come to the town of Swamp's End, a fishing town that seems to be abandoned. The only shop left is the general store, ran by a man named Zeke, who tells the gang that he knows of the zombie and the witch that brought it to life. He and his pal Zeb were frog hunting when they came across the witch in the woods 6 months earlier, but decided to stay in the town anyways. Scooby accidentally eats jumping beans, which make him jump around all over the store. Not really sure if that's how those work. The gang do what the gang do best and decide to poke their noses where they shouldn't belong and investigate Jeb's house, where they find a voodoo doll of Zeb. So the witch and zombie were actually the disguises of Zeb and Zeke. They make up the story of the witch in the swamp to scare away anyone from venturing into the swamp. This is because the two robbed an armored truck years earlier and drove it into the swamp to hide it. Not really the best way to hide an armored car. Now they need to find it, but because these guys are idiots, they forgot where they sank it. They needed to be able to look for it uninterrupted, and what better way than to make a Blair Witch-like story to keep people away. So I don't know if Zeke's always ran the local goods store or if he set up shop after the robbery. Either way, much like Big Bob Oakley, Zeke must have super speed because he was the zombie on the side of the road that the gang saw, and yet somehow he got back to the general store and managed to get out of his costume before the mystery machine arrived. After Scooby makes a mess of the store after eating the jumping beans, the rest of the gang clean it up, and Scooby and Shaggy go to check out Zeb's cabin. But again, Zeke changes into the zombie getup and beats them there. This episode is unique because there are two very different monsters in it, and unlike the gaggle of galloping ghosts, there are two main villains here instead of one, which I believe is the first for Scooby-Doo. So this episode takes place in a dark swamp, probably in Mississippi or Louisiana, somewhere where riverboats were regularly used. This area of the United States is known for its folklore and history with taboo topics such as voodoo, magic, and witchcraft. The local superstitions are also passed down over the years, such as the Natchez Trace Parkway, an area believed to be a gathering place for witches to perform rituals en masse. So for setting, I believe using a witch in the swamp is not only perfect, but also something most people around this area would believe and respect. I mean, there are literally people who live in this area of the country that claim to practice witchcraft today. So even if you don't necessarily believe in witchcraft, why test it? A swamp in itself is already a creepy place as well, with all kinds of diseases and animals posing at risk to one's health. But adding in an old witch in the swamp who practices voodoo, that to me is an easy 5 out of 5 for setting. So right off the bat, these guys are wanted criminals who robbed an armored car years prior. So this alone would already make them very dangerous. You can't really rob an armored car very well without being armed to some degree. Considering that the gang are strangers in the middle of nowhere, and this swamp is full of alligators and supposed witches, they do kidnap and tie Daphne, but this is part for the course at this point. I don't see why Zeb and Zeke wouldn't just kill the gang and hide their bodies in the swamp. I doubt anyone would ever even find them, but for whatever reason, Zeb and Zeke are hard selling this made-up witch story. Again, murder would be the most direct and effective solution to their problems, rather than this extremely elaborate act. But because the two never actively try to kill the gang, even though they did kidnap Daphne, they simply locked her away, possibly to use her later as a hostage, but regardless, I'm giving them a 4 out of 5. I don't believe murder would be that out of the question for these guys, but for whatever reason they avoided it as much as possible. Okay, now on to the designs. The witch design is pretty cool. She looks very sickly, and I like the color of green they gave her. It reminds me a lot of like the Wizard of Oz witch. Also, I love how her arms are about as long as her whole body. Like, Zeb, my guy, you need to get yourself a burger. Like, this is even more thin than Shaggy. This witch design is far better than most other witches later in the series. With the exception of the witch's ghost, this is probably my favorite Scooby-Doo witch design. However, it is somewhat generic. There isn't really a lot going on here. She has a pretty standard witch hat and a purple witch gown, and she has like a stick that she I don't know, I guess it's her wand. I don't think it's the best design in the series, but it is, in my opinion, one of the best witch designs in the series. So I'm going to give her a 4 out of 5, giving her a total of 13 points, placing her in the A tier. Finally, we were getting some A tiers. Now on to the zombie. Oddly enough, the zombie seems to be more popular than the witch, or at least that's what I've seen in my research for this video. Now, I don't hate this design, but also I don't think it's nearly as good as the witch design. One thing of note I do like about the zombie design is he always has this look of like surprised disinterest. Like if someone was high and remembered they left the stove on at home. I know they couldn't add too much decay or rot to the zombie since, you know, this is made for kids. But I feel like maybe adding some discoloration or maybe some muscle showing through would have really pushed home that this was a zombie. Like later on in the series, they do zombies way better, especially on Zombie Island, where they don't really show too much decay. A lot of it's just sunken in features. I really don't get a zombie appearance from this guy. He looks more like a standard monster that could be used for anything, like a ghost, a mutant, a vampire, an orc, or anything else. Now, of course, at the time, zombies were kind of a new thing in a lot of media. The movie Night of the Living Dead came out, I think, 1 year prior to the Scooby-Doo show being made. So that was probably some inspiration taken for the zombie. However, like I said, I don't really think that the zombie really does communicate well that it's a zombie. The slow moving and shambling type nature does fit the Night of the Living Dead in that regard, but other than that, I don't think it's the worst design ever, but it's clearly not in the same level as the Ghost of Captain Cutler or the Ghost Clown. So for the zombie, I'm going to give him a 2 out of 5, giving the zombie 11 points and placing him in the B tier. The zombie really gets carried hard by the witch in the setting from this episode. Without those, I would probably put him way lower. Next up is the Ghost of Redbeard from Go Away Ghost Ship. The Ghost of Redbeard, or Redbeard's ghost, and his crew were real pirates masquerading as ghosts. They would hijack and pirate the freightliners owned by C.L. Magnus and his company, and for whatever reason, just those freightliners, which is really suspicious. The reason given for this is because the real Captain Redbeard was brought to justice by Magnus's ancestors. Redbeard swore an oath of revenge against the Magnus bloodline for taking part in his capture and most likely death. Whether or not this story is true is beside the point, because the Ghost of Redbeard is revealed to be C.L. Magnus himself. He used the legend of the Redbeard pirates as a scapegoat to rob his own ships. He would then sell the cargo on the black market while also filing insurance claims on his vessels. All of which is brilliant, though I really don't see or understand how he did all this with only 2 underlings, 3 flintlocks, and an old pirate ship. I guess all the security and captains on these ships were really superstitious or something. Just looking at Redbeard's hideout, there is millions of dollars worth of equipment and merchandise there. It would have taken at least 200 people to move all of that here in the cave. I highly doubt these two are getting paid nearly enough. Though this is interesting, I believe this is the first time that the Scooby Gang actually seek out a mystery rather than having it either fall into their laps or from knowing someone who needs their help. The gang first read about the Ghost of Redbeard in the malt shop, and then track down C.L. Magnus's penthouse. So C.L. Magnus has his butler who looks a lot like Lurch from the Addams Family. I don't know why they gave this guy such attention to detail. Like, he actually has a really cool design for the amount of relevance he has in this. They try to play it up like he's spying on the gang's conversation, but this goes nowhere. It was probably an attempt to try to throw the audience off of who the real culprit was, which is a nice touch because usually they don't really do that for these episodes. Anyway, the gang tried to tell the creepy butler that they're here to help, but he's like, "I'm afraid not. He's not to be disturbed," and then turns him away. So then they come back and solid snake their way up as waiters, and for some reason the butler doesn't recognize these waiters as the exact same teenagers he told earlier couldn't come up, but then he's surprised they're bringing room service up this late. Again, characters having the attention span of a Gen Alpha. So after begging C.L. Magnus to let them help, he gives the kids a quick rundown about his Redbeard story and his family's involvement in his death. So, real quick, if the Coast Guard can't handle 3 pirates in an ancient pirate ship, then why are you telling 5 teenagers? Like, what are they going to do? Again, the villain of the episode is the bane of their own undoing. He could simply have just said, "Get out," and that would have been the end of it. Who am I kidding? The mystery gang still would have gotten involved anyway. So this episode's really cool for a lot of reasons, and I know that a lot of people consider this to be one of the staple episodes of Scooby-Doo, and I kind of also consider that. For one, there are really nice gags in this episode and very memorable scenes. I think Redbeard as a whole is a pretty memorable villain. Now granted, this is one of those villains that do talk quite a bit, but he's also one of the villains that really has its own unique personality, and he really does lean into the pirate theme very hard. Like, even after taking Shaggy and Scooby as hostages, he still buys into the pirate theme and puts them to work, and they are convinced that ghosts like the most disgusting food ever, so they make a ghost stew. Honestly, it's one of the best gags in the whole series. There's another couple of great gags too, like the jackhammer that falls on Redbeard and could have easily killed him. Also, Shaggy has a rare moment once again where he utilizes his voice as a weapon against these ghosts.
First, a paper pirate hat. And next, my super Shaggy imitation of Redbeard.
They went that away! Get going, you swabs!
It's something I really do appreciate about Scooby-Doo Where Are You is they really try to give Shaggy some unique quirks, like his ventriloquism and being able to mimic different voices or being able to make different sounds, like the train sound from the Miner 49er. I really wish they would have kept that gimmick going later on into the Scooby-Doo franchises. Honestly, in later series, they kind of just devolved Shaggy and Scooby to be nearly the same person, mostly just doing comedic gags and being scared of everything and just wanting to eat food all the time. But Scooby-Doo Where Are You really did flesh out these characters and made them more unique than the later iterations did. Also, there's a really cool scene. I know I keep going on, but this is really cool. Scooby like cuts the thick fog and eats it like a donut. And when I was a kid, I actually thought it looked good. And I thought like you could actually do that in fog, which was obviously a lie, but it was still really cool as a kid to see that. Anyway, so the setting of this episode is a number of different things. There's the pirate ship, the ocean, and Skull Island. All of these are pretty much prime real estate for terror. For one, the pirate ship is a real 17th century brigantine ship. The ship is also surrounded by a thick, unnatural fog, though this just turns out to be dry ice dropped in the ocean. It is still an unnatural fog though, since dry ice isn't naturally found in the ocean in this large quantity. If an ancient 17th century pirate ship came out of an unnaturally thick fog, followed by an unhinged, booming laughter, that alone would be worthy of a 5 out of 5. But then we also have Redbeard's hideout, which is an entire island shaped like a skull. Also, the password to get into this crazy island is
Yum, 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 and a liverwurst a la mode. Wow, what a password.
Yeah, and it worked this voice-activated secret entrance.
Look.
So I guess Redbeard or C.L. Magnus has the exact same eating habits as Shaggy does. Again, I wonder if Skull Island, Colonel Sanders, and the Haunted Isle and the Graveyard of Ships are all located in exactly the same ocean, because if so, wow, you guys need to quarantine this entire area. So yeah, for setting, I think it's an easy 5 out of 5. For threat level, Redbeard does carry a flintlock pistol. However, he never actually used it, so it may be fake. But these guys are real pirates, and as such, have more than likely used these fake guns to hold the crew of freighters hostage, though I don't see how. They also have swords, and one of these swords is a ghost sword. This is a real sword that supposedly floats from the use of wires. However, I find this especially hard to believe for many reasons. First off, who is controlling this sword? All three of these pirates are seen together all the time, especially in his hideout, Skull Island. The sword is free roaming. How is it able to make such precise cuts and slashes, and with enough force to chop and slash through objects like wood and liverwurst? How is it able to travel throughout the whole pirate ship and Skull Island caves? None of this makes any sense or is ever explained. Usually they do try to make these kind of gimmicks make sense to some degree, like the bat from the Gaggle of Galloping Ghosts being on a wire so it only went in one direction. But they kind of just hand wave this magic sword away as
down to the ghost sword operated by wires.
So I think it's a pretty solid 5 out of 5 for danger level on the sword alone, but also because Redbeard basically tells the gang that he can't let them leave his secret lair.
Stores his stolen cargo.
And this is where Redbeard will keep his secret forever.
Zoinks!
Which, I don't know about you guys, but them some death threats right there. As for character design, the Redbeard pirate is influenced by infamous real-life pirates, like Blackbeard. Redbeard's appearance is unique for a couple of reasons. For one, his eyes are particularly interesting. His left eye is bulging out while his right eye seems kind of sunken in. He wears a red pirate suit, brown boots, and a pirate hat, and his namesake Redbeard. His clothes aren't anything particularly special. In fact, I think the magenta and orange and reds really doesn't feel all that threatening for a pirate. He does have a pretty iconic laugh though, and honestly he reminds me of an early One Piece character. So far so good, but I have to talk about something that bothers me. I don't really buy that he is a ghost. For one, he talks way too much for what a ghost should. Also, him and his crew take over modern real-world ships and pirate them like any normal modern pirate. I think it would have been a lot more interesting if he had more ghostly qualities, like maybe pale skin or an emitting glow. Honestly, he just looks like a pirate to me. Redbeard feels more like a time-displaced pirate more than a ghost of one. That would have been a really cool episode, I think, if these pirates were real pirates. They weren't ghosts or undead or anything. They just got time displaced into the future or something. In any case, Overall, a fairly unique take on a ghost, and definitely one of Scooby-Doo's more iconic monsters. So for design, I'm giving him a 4 out of 5, which gives him a solid 14 points. Ooh, so close to an S tier. But at the very least, he is leading the A tier for now. The character must have been a fan favorite too, because they bring this guy back in the new Scooby-Doo movies episode, The Creep from the Deep. But for some reason, the Scooby Gang do not recognize that it's the Redbeard disguise. I mean, you would think they would be like, hey, wait, didn't we already face this guy already? It's almost like the later Scooby series aren't canon to Where Are You? Anyway, moving on. Now we have one of my favorite monsters from the original series, the Space Kook from the Kooky Space Kook. Now, they never actually gave this guy a proper name in the episode. It was just called the Space Ghost.
I'll bet it's the outer space ghost!
But fans liked the name Space Kook so much that it was later adapted as the monster's real name. The episode starts with the Mystery Machine running out of gas while driving through the countryside. They break down right in front of an old farmhouse, but when they attempt to see if anyone's home, the owner of the farm appears from the side of the house. He mistakes them for reporters trying to press him for information and starts waving a shotgun around while barking orders for them to leave his property. We find out from the farmer that the surrounding area has been terrorized by strange phenomena, like flying ghostly UFOs and glowing footprints being spotted throughout the countryside. The same footprints that just so happen to be leading right past Farmer's house. After helping the gang with some gas, the gang hit the road again just in time to see the ghostly craft from another world touch down in a decrepit World War II airfield where the Space Kook waits. So for starters, can we all just appreciate how cool this episode is? For one, this is the first time that aliens are ever used in Scooby-Doo as a monster type, and oh my god, they nailed it. Secondly, the idea of using an abandoned army base as a setting is just brilliant, and here's why. Battlefields and military bases come with a pre-built subtext of carrying some sort of violent history, especially during the World War II era. These are places where people either died or were sent off to die. In fact, battlefields and battle bases are some of the most documented haunted places in the world. Seeing a military base that was once used to train soldiers and send them off to their deaths now turn into this haunting resemblance of the past and all of the lingering trauma associated with it. It's the perfect place for a Scooby-Doo episode, and honestly, I don't think any other location would do the Space Kook justice. So for the setting, it gets a resounding 5 out of 5. Now on to the Kooky Goober's threat level. For the most part, the Space Kook was the standard Scooby villain, chasing the gang around, trying to spook them, and scaring people away from an area that the monster wanted to claim. But there is one moment where the Space Ghoul tries to do a little more than just scare the gang. While Fred, Daphne, and Velma are investigating a tool shed, the Space Kook turns on a winch used for lifting airplane motors. Now, to be fair, this doesn't harm anyone, but it does snag Fred by the belt. So I don't think the Space Kook could in any way control what happens once he turned this switch on. This hook could have easily snagged any one of them by the arm, torso, or even head, and could have seriously injured or worse, could have killed them. These kind of tools are extremely dangerous, so Fred was very lucky here. Because the Space Kook tried to attack the gang without being noticed, this means that he didn't care about the outcome. I think it's fair to assume that he is not above harming or even killing someone to protect his secret. And his secret was he just wanted to scare anyone he could away from the land and buy it dirt cheap. So, the standard Scooby-Doo plot. But much like how the Puppet Master tried to use sandbags to harm the gang, I feel like using an old hook to kill someone would be a great cover story to hide behind. The gang wandered into an old hazardous military base and had an accident, resulting in one or more of their deaths. For danger level, it's another 5 out of 5. Okay, now for design. Right off the bat, I believe without a doubt that the Space Kook's design and concept was heavily inspired by the real-life sightings of the infamous cryptid, the Flatwoods Monster. The Flatwoods Monster was spotted almost 20 years before this episode aired, and much like the Space Kook's craft, the Flatwoods Monster was first seen as a meteor touching down in some farmland. The Flatwoods Monster has a lot of similarities to the Space Kook. They both have a metal suit glowing eyes, and a dome around their head. Also, the Flatwoods monster sighting took place in farmland, much like the Space Kook. This is one of those stories that really is interesting to listen to, and I highly recommend you look it up. This alien story has a lot of credit because multiple people claim to have seen it, and it was definitely a popular story at the time. So I definitely think the Space Kook took a lot of liberties from this story. The Space Kook's design looks like a skeletal corpse of an alien in a spacesuit, which is, yeah, that's pretty hardcore. The Space Kook's whole body pulsates a green glow, and also he leaves these glowing footprints everywhere he goes, very similarly to Captain Cutler. Actually, these two have a lot in common the more I think about it. Like the ghost of Captain Cutler, the Space Kook has one of the most iconic and creepy cackles of all time. And to this day stands out amongst most Scooby villains. Also, when the Space Kook laughs, his whole dome flashes red. Like, bro, straight nightmare fuel. I can't help but feel some sort of Lovecraftian energy emitting from this guy. I think it's the idea of a ghost from space seeking out worlds to invade even in death, or perhaps the Space Kook was never even alive. Like, the build-up and mystery to this guy is so cool. They never actually explain what he is or any of the story behind it. It just shows up. Like, obviously it's not a real monster, but like the history behind what this monster was supposed to be is really cool. Was it supposed to be a ghost of an astronaut from the future maybe? Or was it a ghost from a different planet that died out? It's really a shame that the culprit behind the getup wasn't that memorable though. I mean, he's just like some farmer who wanted to scare people away. So if it wasn't apparent by now, the Space Kook is an easy 5 out of 5 for design, making him our 3rd S tier. But where in the S tier should he go? Well, I definitely think the Space Kook beats out the Ghost Clown in the design and setting department. But does he beat good old Captain Cutler? You see, the two things I find the most terrifying are the ocean and space. Both settings evoke a powerful sense of cosmic horror. There's just something about the vastness of space and the vastness of the ocean that evokes this primal sense of dread. Also, both of these characters' designs are unique and equally stand out as the best of the best. True S tiers, but to be honest, I'm going to have to bump the Space Kook to the top of the list for one reason: the mysterious origin of his ghost. You see, we already get a lot of backstory of the ghost of Captain Cutler from his wife and Ebenezer Shark. Now, don't get me wrong, it's great lore, but the idea of a cosmic entity showing up from space with no information whatsoever, that not even the locals know what to do and feel the need to arm themselves, I feel like that is more of a threat than the ghost of Captain Cutler. Like I said before, it gives me very Lovecraftian vibes, like something straight out of the Dunwich Horror. Also, taking into account the similarities of the real-world events with the Flatwoods monster, I think the Space Kook is the best monster we have seen thus far. But will the Space Kook remain the S-tier king? Well, not for long, because now we have another fan favorite and possibly the most famous Scooby-Doo monster of all time.
They're opening! It's them! The cousins! Only he's not a shadow. He's a green ghost.
The Phantom Shadow from A Night of Fright is no delight. Man, the later half of Season 1 has some straight bangers. The episode opens with the gang sailing to a mysterious island where Scooby-Doo is to partake in the will reading of one Beauregard Sanders, whose life Scooby-Doo saved years prior. This house, if you can even call it a house, is literally in the middle of the flipping ocean. And honestly, even for $1 million, haunted or not, I don't think I would even want to go anywhere near this place, let alone spend a night here. The whole house looks like it could be swept away in a wave, or the foundation could give way, making it slide into the ocean. It looks like a house straight from Harry Potter. When they arrive, they meet the rest of the Colonel's family. The lawyers in charge of the will then play a tape.
Greetings, y'all. Cousin Simple, Nephew Normal, Sweet Cousin Maldehyde, Cousin Slicker, and my old friend Scooby-Doo. Nitty-gritty of inheriting my fortune. Y'all going to receive an equal share of the $1 million providing you spend tonight here in the old family mansion.
That shouldn't be too hard.
The house is haunted.
Oh? Haunted?
Yes, haunted. And those of you that don't stay, his share of the the fortune will go to the others. Now, good night, and pleasant dreams, y'all.
Yeah, again, I feel like this would be a hard pass, even for $1 million. Like, you have no idea if the other family members wouldn't just kill you. Also, the Colonel is one sadistic person in all this. He made it so that when he dies, his fortune is split 5 ways between his remaining relatives and a dog. But in order to get this money, they have to travel all the way to this safety hazard of a building in the middle of the sea, and tells everyone he cares about that they get nothing unless they spend a whole night in his haunted house. And it turns out the $1 million he was leaving to them all was in fact Confederate money, which is worthless, and he should have definitely known it was worthless, since this takes place in 1970s, almost 100 years after the Civil War. So yeah, this guy was one twisted motherfucker. Honestly, it sounds like a plot for a Netflix horror movie. And the crazy thing is, this guy presumably liked his family. The Colonel's lawyers are named Cosgood Creeps and Mr. Craws.
Creeps and crawls? They sure picked the right lawyers for this job.
You said it, Shags. These guys are the ghost in this episode, which should be made pretty obvious by this scene. I love how Cousin Slicker and everyone else don't seem to be bothered the least bit. So the gang decide to stay the night, but crap hits the fan real quick when Cousin Simple goes missing, and a deranged, gleeful laughter echoes through the hallways. The gang check out Cousin Simple's room and find a warning written on the mirror, and the gang buckle in for one hell of a night. So where do I even begin with this house? Like the trap doors, hidden rooms, walls that close in on each other, and the fact that it's all located in the middle of a really choppy ocean, disappearing guests, a deaf game for counterfeit money, all while the creepiest ghosts the gang have ever run up against are running around shrieking like the Joker on steroids. It's a 5 out of 5 for sure. Remember when I went over the Elias Kingston Manor and I said that there were far better haunted houses later on? Well, this is what I was talking about. This is easily the best haunted house in all of the original series, and it's not even close. This episode is iconic for many reasons, and the location is definitely one of them. Also, the whodunit nature of the episode is definitely another huge reason why it stands out. And oh my god, the ghosts are insane and are so iconic that even today their designs are being used in all forms of Scooby media. And we will get to their design here in a sec. But first, let's talk about how much of a threat they were. Aside from scaring away most of the relatives and making the gang believe that they were all dead inside coffins, the ghosts were not above actually killing the gang either. Top example of this is when they tried to smash the gang in a room with moving walls. It was only through the quick thinking of Scooby that they managed to avoid this fate. You could argue that the Phantoms primed it in advance, and clearly the Phantoms had no intention of stopping the trap. Even if you want to excuse this as an attempt on the gang's life, there is another instance where the ghosts literally tried to push Shaggy, Scooby, and Velma off of a rain pipe into the jagged cliffs below. So yeah, attempted murder would definitely be on their rap sheet, which of course already just makes them a 5 out of 5, and I think you all know where this is going. The design of these guys are so iconic even today. The melting face, the rattling chains, and the laughs, and the way they move, it is all so haunting. It makes the Phantom from Hassel in the Castle look cute compared to this. I can't help but notice how similar the Phantom's shadow looks to the Ghostface mask from the Scream franchise. Also the way their hands are just have these pointed fingers and their eerie green bodies, like they're just perfect in every way. There is clear inspiration from depictions of the Grim Reaper, or even the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come from the Christmas Carol. So obviously they get a 5 out of 5 for their design, making them one of our S tiers of course, and I'm going to go ahead and just say it, probably the best ghost design in the entire Scooby-Doo franchise. Like, I really can't think of any better ghost designs than this. Now, personally, I like the Space Kook more from a cosmic horror standpoint, but I don't think even the Kook can hold a candle to the location, the threat level, and the design, or even how iconic these green ghosts are. They even made an episode of the widely popular CW show Supernatural dedicated to this episode of Scooby-Doo called Scooby Natural.
A night of fright is no delight. What? That's the episode we're in. I've seen it like 1,000,000 times.
where a real ghost haunts a VHS tape of A Night of Fright Is No Delight and turns the Phantom's shadow into a real murderous ghost that actually does kill the cousins. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
So for now, we have a new S-tier king. But there are a few others coming up that may be able to dethrone the Green Ghouls. So moving forward, we have the Snow Ghost from That's Snow Ghost. While attempting a ski trip, the gang were only able to book tickets at a place called Wolf's End Lodge. The lodge keeper is a very obese man named Mr. Greenway, and a small fish-eyed man named Mr. Leash comes in and has a very interesting conversation which throws red flags all over the place.
It's cold out there. Excuse me for interrupting, but could you put the suitcase in a safe place for me, Mr. Greenway?
Certainly, certainly.
Nice doggy. Nice doggy.
Despite this, the gang decide to stay anyway. Mr. Greenway shows them to their rooms and warns them, or rather just tells them about the Snow Ghost. And he said that this Snow Ghost, if he gets their hands on them, will turn them into ghosts. Yeah, I think we all know what he's talking about here, but we'll get to that later. So after the gang explore a bit and have their runs-in with the Snow Ghost, they run into a Tibetan monk named Fulang Chi, who claims to have had a run-in with the Himalayan Yeti, and that in invading the Yeti dies by falling off a mountain, but he fears his ghost is now haunting him. So Fulang Chi is able to befriend a Timberwolf and feeds to Timberwolf bones, and so the Timberwolf, I guess, protects Fulang Chi from the ghost of the Yeti. So I have no idea about Tibetan lore, but I don't think that wolves can really keep ghosts away necessarily. I mean, it does in this case because the Snow Ghost isn't a real ghost, but Fulang Chi should know this, that a real ghost could just go right past a wolf. So the Snow Ghost is actually supposed to be the ghost of the Yeti that Fulang Chi saw. Again, like Redbeard's ghost, the Snow Ghost, or a monster very similar to the Snow Ghost, shows up in the new Scooby-Doo movies, in the episode with Laurel and Artie. This one is simply called the Ghost of Bigfoot, and for those who don't know, a Yeti is the Himalayan breed of a Bigfoot. So they basically just reused the Snow Ghost, but it's a brand Diet Coke variation. Not to crap on the new Scooby-Doo movies, because I really do like the series, but the monster designs and the plots in that show took a backseat to the guest stars and the comic antics of the gang, which is a shame because there are a couple designs in that show that I really did like the Ghost of the Red Baron, for instance. But for the most part, the monsters really aren't all that great. Anyway, back to the episode. So the story that Fulang Chi gave to Mr. Greenway is what sparks the Snow Ghost monster. Turns out the Snow Ghost was in fact Mr. Greenway, and he and Mr. Leash were jewelry smugglers who smuggled jewels across the Canadian border in hollowed logs. I mean, sure, I guess. So first off, we need to talk about this guy's insane threat level. Honestly, he almost puts the ghost clown to shame with his depravity. First off, Mr. Greenway tells the gang that they should lock their doors and windows because if they don't, the Snow Ghost will get them and turn them into ghosts. Now, this might not seem like much, but remember this show was made for children. So this was actually a censored way of saying the Snow Ghost would literally just kill them. And this is no bluff, as you will soon see. After giving the gang their dire warning, Mr. Greenway then proceeds to leave the room while hysterically laughing like a supervillain.
And turn you into ghosts!
And by the way, again, Mr. Greenway is the Snow Ghost, so yeah, he doesn't do a very good job at covering it up. Why the gang didn't just leave after hearing their host essentially threaten them, I have no idea. Anyways, the Snow Ghost has one of the most clear, blatant acts of attempted murder in the whole series, and it's rather insidious. He chains Velma to a wooden log and attempts to have her buzzsawed in half from the bottom up. So basically, I honestly don't think anyone can match this, not even the Ghost Clown, because while yes, the lion cage is definitely horrific, Shaggy was not aware of the events leading up to it. Velma was very much so aware of her immediate death, and this way of killing her was clearly torture that Mr. Greenway reveled in. one of the most demented monsters in all of Scooby-Doo. Alright, so the setting for this area is kind of everywhere. First off, you have the lodge, and then you also have outside in the snow, and then you have the sawmill. I think the main thing that makes this setting in this episode a particularly alarming place is because the snow ghost is all white, which can make it really easy for him to blend in the background. Also, plenty of unexplained phenomenon have happened in mountain regions, so this definitely can add to the suspense. However, I wouldn't say any of these places are inherently that scary by themselves, or at least not to the degree that other areas in this list are. So for setting, I'm giving the Snow Ghost a 4 out of 5. I'm only giving it that high of score because of the Snow Ghost. Had it been any other color or any other villain, I probably would make it way less. As for the design, the Snow Ghost is supposed to resemble the Yeti that Fu Longqi apparently saw. The disguise must be really close to, because he is convinced it actually is the ghost of the Yeti. The Snow Ghost has a body very similarly to a polar bear, which is probably due to the large, obese body that Mr. Greenway has. What I personally like about this design is the face. It almost looks like the Snow Ghost is crying or in a state of distress. Also, the eyebrows flare up, like resembling horns of some sort. This wouldn't be the last time that the Yeti, a ghost of a Yeti, Bigfoot, or other snow ghost type monsters would show up in the series. So as the first of an archetype, it's a pretty solid yet simple design. So I think I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5, with 13 points placing the Snow Ghost in the A tier, right behind the Ghost of Redbeard. And with that, we have officially covered all of Season 1. But before we proceed to Season 2, there are a couple of things I would like to talk about. The second season of Scooby-Doo is very different than the first. A new opening is used, with the theme song being performed by Austin Roberts, who replaced the Larry Marks version of the theme song. I will admit that I adore the Larry Marks opening, and I think it is part of the reason why the original show was so well received, even by today's standards. The bats flying past the Kingston Manor as the ghostly text of Scooby-Doo pops up, while the smooth voice of Larry Marks sings in the background, may be one of the most impactful openings in animation history. And for many, this scene alone is what they think of when they hear the name Scooby-Doo. The Scooby-Doo theme is one of those classics that was like lightning in a bottle, and ever so often it will randomly pop into my head. Now, while I don't hate the Austin Roberts opening, in fact, I think it's also pretty great. It simply doesn't compare to the original by Larry Marks. Sadly, both of these fantastic vocalists have since passed away, but their legacies will live on in the Scooby-Doo franchise for generations to come. Moving forward with Season 2, Austin Roberts would also exclusively work on Scooby-Doo as a songwriter and singer. This was because Season 2 added mid-episode chase scenes and songs to go with them. I guess the creative team thought that the audience were losing interest halfway through the episodes, and decided to add a midpoint to refocus their attention. Whatever the case, I love this idea, and it's unfortunate that most Scooby series stopped doing this after Season 2 of Where Are You? Years later, What's New Scooby-Doo would bring back midway chase songs, and again, that show has some real bangers as well. Maybe one day I'll have to cover that series. The second season felt far better structured than the majority of Season 1, and for the most part, the monsters are all bangers as well. You can definitely tell that the series found its groove and style compared to the first handful of episodes from Season 1. Despite that, there are only 8 episodes. Each one stands out in one way or the other. Most of these 8 episodes are fan favorites, and despite that the first season had 17 episodes compared to the second season's 8, I actually had to keep double checking because I could have sworn that Season 2 had more episodes. But nope, it's just 8. And with the exception of maybe 2 of those 8, they are some of the best episodes in the entire series. Now we're going to go ahead and get into Season 2, but first, a word from me. Well, hello there. I'd like to take a moment to thank everybody for watching this far into the video. If you are watching this video and you made it this far, then consider leaving a like and sharing the video. It helps me out so much. And if you enjoy this kind of content, then maybe consider subscribing. These videos can take anywhere from 2 months to a couple of days. It really just depends on the content and the topic I'm covering. And because I do this for free and I have a full-time job, it means that I make these videos very slowly. So I apologize for that. In the future, I will try to make more content and hopefully it will be just as good, if not better than this. My goal for this channel is by Christmas 2025 is to have 1,000 subs. And with your help, I can get that done. So again, it means the most to me for the support you guys give. And I really appreciate that I have managed to make 300 and I think 31 subscribers now, which is awesome. I really appreciate that you guys liked my content, and these tier list videos are a lot of fun to do. However, they are also very long. So because of that, I'm going to try making more shorter content in the future. Videos kind of like what I did with the Exivos video. I plan on doing more show reviews, more video game reviews, but most importantly, I want to do more tier lists. And so with more subs, I can do that. And with that out of the way, we are back.
Season 2 starts with the episode Nowhere to Hide. This is also the first episode that the voice actress for Daphne changed. She was originally voiced by, and I apologize if I butcher this name, Indira Stefiana, but she would step away from the role when she moved to New York with her then husband. Daphne's new voice actress would become Heather North. Heather took on the role after her roommate and fellow cast member Nicole Jaffe, who voiced Velma, convinced her to audition. Heather would continue to voice Daphne for over 20 years and has become the most recognized voice of the character.
So the episode starts with a jewelry robbery by a local criminal known as the Ghost of Hyde. This guy seems to be able to climb walls and break into tall buildings with ease. So he scales this building with a jewelry store on one of the upper floors and grabs this gold necklace, then dips. When he starts to climb down though, he starts to hysterically laugh. And there's this police officer who hears Hyde and then sees him climbing down but does nothing except blow his whistle. I know this is the 70s and security was lax back then, but Hyde is able to steal this necklace with such ease. The jewelry store window wasn't locked, and worst of all, the display case wasn't locked. Also, there was no alarms whatsoever. The policeman did nothing to stop Hyde, and like I said, I know this was the 70s, but maybe police officers just didn't carry firearms? I don't know. Anyway, Hyde then books it on foot a couple of blocks without running into anyone or without being stopped by the police, and hides in a very familiar unlocked van parked in front of a very familiar malt shop. It's the Mystery Machine, of all things. The Mystery Gang leave their favorite restaurant, and Velma's talking about some weird movie to Shaggy called The Teenage Blob. Anyways, they get inside the Mystery Machine and leave, unaware of their new passenger. Okay, so this really actually scared me as a kid. Scooby finds this guy just sitting under a blanket, and the first thing he does is he just smiles at Scooby. So anyway, the gang freak out, and Hyde hops out and makes a run for it in the dark marsh. Really convenient how they just so happen to be driving by the place Hyde needs to go to. The only reason that they even find out that Hyde is hiding is because Scooby went to get a blanket. Had Scooby not went for the blanket, I guess that Hyde would have just kept hiding? Because how would he know where his stop is in the back of a van? Seriously, how did he not get caught by now? He has like no contingency for his escape. Yet somehow this guy is making a circus out of the police. Anyways, back to the plot. The gang follow Hyde into the marsh and come across an old creepy Victorian house owned by a Dr. Jekyll. Dr. Jekyll claims to be the ancestor to the original Dr. Jekyll from the story Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And like his ancestor, he believes that he too is turning into the evil Mr. Hyde, but this time as his ghost. So how would that even work? How can you be alive and then turn into your alternate personality, which is a ghost? Like, is this some Danny Phantom type stuff? This episode is unique because Dr. Jekyll pretty much straight up tells the gang that he is the ghost, but tries to play victim and pins the blame on his housemaid by finding evidence that would point to her trying to frame the good doctor instead. A bit of a gotcha moment, but he was doomed from the beginning by letting the gang stay inside of his house. Like, if I was a jewel thief, I wouldn't let a group of self-proclaimed detectives investigate my house. They have no legal right to do so. And like I said before, this guy is not that smart for being called a doctor. The Hyde house is located by a marshland. The house is a Victorian-style house with trapdoors and hidden rooms, you know, the norm. But it's not too dissimilar to the Kingston Manor in this regard. Where the house starts to get interesting is the basement's mad scientist lab. It reminds me of the lab from the Franken Castle, which does add something interesting to this house. However, I think the Game Boy Color game, Scooby-Doo Classic Creep Capers, had a way more interesting take on the house and the secret lab, which was actually its own location. You can actually get this game pretty cheap, surprisingly, so I definitely recommend it. It's a pretty fun game. The Hyde house isn't the worst or the best house on the list. I actually think I prefer the Kingston Manor, but not by much. So I think I'll give it a 3 out of 5 for now. Mr. Hyde's danger level is all over the place. For the first Season 2 monster, he really does try to check all boxes. First off, he breaks into businesses and vehicles, which makes him already a threat for people's safety, but then he also kidnaps Shaggy when Shaggy finds suction cups in a fruit bowl. This is one of the few times that Shaggy actually gets kidnapped. He then ties Shaggy to a table and claims to be turning Shaggy into a frog? Now, whether or not this was actually going to happen is unlikely, but considering what Hyde has done, I believe he would have been willing to silence Shaggy from telling the others what he found. So up to this point, Hyde has been misleading the gang with fake clues, trying to frame Helga, but Shaggy found the first real clue. Hyde used these suction cups to cling to walls and make it look like he was climbing them. This was both to make it look like he had some sort of supernatural abilities to enter tall buildings, and 2, to frame Helga. If he did manage to frame Helga though, he would have had to given up his Mr. Hyde disguise permanently, or else Helga would have just been proven innocent if Hyde struck again. Again, this guy's plans kind of sucked. Hyde implies he was going to turn Shaggy into a frog, or at the very least he would have probably drugged Shaggy and got rid of the suction cups as clues. It's hard to really say just how far he would have went to silence Shaggy. So for danger level, I'm going to give him a 4 out of 5. Also, I think this is like the first time that Scooby actually showed this level of bravery. I mean, he did beat up the Apeman and he also attacked Dracula and the Wolfman, but he actually comes to the rescue here and saves Shaggy. This is one of the first times you really see Scooby take on the villain one-on-one like this, and it really does show the loyalty he has to Shaggy, which is a really nice touch. This segues into the Austin Roberts song for this episode, which is A Recipe for My Love. And honestly, it's one of my favorite songs from the second season. It also leads to one of my favorite chase scenes as well. Also, not all the times, but the lyrics of these songs seem to have some vague relation to the episode they're being performed in. In this case, the person in the song is trying to make a concoction to express his love for someone. While that part has no relation to the episode, the use of mixing formulas does with Mr. Hyde being a scientist. These segments also are really cool because it allows Scooby and Shaggy to really unleash their inner tune power, but usually these segments are self-contained and have no real weight to the plot. Okay, so here's where I'm probably going to get a lot of hate. I know a lot of people really like the Ghost of Mr. Hyde, and for some people this episode is considered a good one. Me personally, I think his design is only slightly better than the Ghost of Elias Kingston. The only thing really working for Hyde here is his very emotive face and his posture. Like, Kingston would just walk into a room and start blabbering about the Weatherby fortune and then scroll out. This guy at least tries to act like a monster, so for that I have to give him some credit, but the actual design is very strange. Most interpretations of Mr. Hyde represent him as a hunched yet stocky brute that acts more animalistic than man, usually with large teeth and a hairy body, more like a primitive beast. He's also depicted as well dressed with a cane. Now obviously Scooby-Doo can do as they please and don't need to follow this depiction. However, the Ghost of Hyde has no similarities at all to the book's sake. This is strange because Scooby does Mr. Hyde again a few times later on in the series, and these Mr. Hydes more closely fit the traditional description of the character. The Ghost of Mr. Hyde looks like a creeper prototype. I don't hate the design, but I do feel that it is lackluster compared to its namesake. Even giving Hyde a cane or an English cloak would have been better than the weird looking green sack he wears. Again, sorry to hate on this guy, but for the design, I think it's one of the most disappointing in the whole series. So I have to give him a 2 out of 5. That gives Hyde 9 points, and I think I'm going to put him right behind the Black Knight for now. The next episode is the Mystery Mask Mix-Up, and for this one we have 2 monsters. Well, technically 3, but 2 of these are the exact same. We have the Ghost of the Warlord Zen Tuo and the Scare Pair, which are supposed to be Zen Tuo's zombie henchmen. So this group of monsters are interesting for a couple of reasons. First off, the Scare Pair drive cars, which is normally not something that zombies are known to do. Also, these guys go walking around Chinatown right out in the open. It's pretty obvious that these guys are not monsters or even ghosts. They are clearly just men in masks. Like, you can actually see their skin, and they're very much so not the same color as their face. Anyways, the episode starts with Zen Tuo ordering the Scare Pair to retrieve the Mask of Zen Tuo. This mask holds codes that are needed for international smuggling. Unfortunately for the Scare Pair, the mystery gang are visiting Chinatown, and Daphne purchases the mask from a local antiquity shop. So the scare pair hunt the mystery gang down, which leads to this. Yeah, again, this series was made in the 1960s, so I give it a pass for being a product of its time.
But this episode does use a lot of racist stereotypes to the Chinese culture.
That would just simply never fly today. Anyways, after evading the masked pursuers, the gang decide to find out what is so important about this mask and take it to a respected Oriental art dealer, A Fong. A Fong is actually the ghost of Zen Chuo and the leader of the smuggling empire that needs the golden mask. So he tries to scare the kids into getting rid of the mask by telling them that it belongs to Zen Chuo, and as long as they hold the mask, they will be in extreme danger. So like, this guy is the one who needs the mask. He's the one who sent the goons after the mask. The mask is right there. Why don't you just tell the kids, hey, can I take it to the back of the room real quick to do some tests on it? I just want to test the legitimacy of it. And you could take the recording out, or better yet, why don't you just offer to buy the mask from them? Being like, oh, well, I'd love to have this in my collection. But he doesn't do any of that. He just sends them on their way. So after leaving, the gang are pursued by the scare pair once again, and this leads into the Austin Roberts chase song for this episode, which is I Can Make You Happy. This song plays while the gang are being chased throughout Chinatown, and much like the previous song, I Can Make You Happy has a vague relation to what is happening on screen, with the lyrics mentioning going around a bend and taking someone somewhere. The rest of the song has absolutely nothing to do with anything in this episode, but it's a catchy tune for sure. Definitely not my favorite chase song, but it's still not bad. After driving through hotels and over rooftops in a chase that would put Dom Toretto to shame, the scare pair managed to kidnap Daphne. The gang find a laundry ticket left behind with the words Temple in the Hills written backwards. So the gang obviously go to investigate. So the main location for this episode is the Temple in the Hills, a local haunted Buddhist temple. Now, I really like that they used a Buddhist temple in this episode as a location. Religious buildings or sites can be prime real estate for creepy settings. This is because many religious sites are sacred ground and act as a place where powerful beings or practices are worshipped. Although these rituals might not be supernatural or malicious in nature, there is a disconnect from outsiders looking in and having an innate fear or worry about practices that they don't understand. So if there is a haunted temple that the locals fear, then there has to be some kind of merit to this fear. Unfortunately, as cool as the Temple of the Hills is, we really don't stick around it very long. The temple is filled with ancient artifacts and religious statues, like a giant Buddha in the main corridor, which is a really nice set piece. Despite how cool of a setting this was, I do wish we got to see more of it, because most of the temple we do see is just red rooms and repeating hallways. A good bit of this episode was taken up by exploring Chinatown, and so I feel like a lot of the Temple in the Hills was kind of missed out on this. I do give it props for being a unique location, but unfortunately I have to give the Temple in the Hills a 3 out of 5. It really does make me wish that the original series had an old church setting in one of these episodes, but I think the show probably tried to stay away from religious topics in general. Anyways, on to the danger level. So like I did with the Witch and Zombi, I'm going to separate the two monsters here. Zen Chuo is the final boss of this episode, and was also a boss in the game Scooby-Doo Unmasked. Much like the Snow Ghost and the Ghost Clown, Zen Chuo is one of the few Scooby villains who outright attempts to murder Scooby and Shaggy via blowing them up.
Don't you know it's illegal to shoot off fireworks and wreck a storeroom?
We will build a new storeroom.
Like who's gonna build a new us?
So yeah, also, he runs a criminal empire, so killing probably is something that comes with the job description. So easily a 5 out of 5 for the danger level. The scare pair were henchmen, and pretty blatantly just thugs with masks. I mean, they literally drive a car. Now, they did kidnap Daphne, and whether or not they would have actually killed her, I think it would depend entirely on Zen Chuo. So if they would have killed Daphne, I think I would merit Zen Chuo with that and not them. I mean, to be fair though, she wasn't blindfolded, which means she probably knew the location where she was being held. I don't even know why they gagged her in the car. So I doubt that ultimately they would let her live. So I think I'm going to give them a 4.5 out of 5. Whether or not they actually killed her would probably hinge on Zen Chuo's orders. The design for these guys actually looks pretty cool. I like the masks in the suit, but like I said before, it's clear that they are just thugs in a mask. They drive cars and shake down businessmen. Not really a convincing monster type. So a 1 out of 5 for the design. Zencho, on the other hand, has a very unique design, but feels off for the general theme of the show, feeling more like a Fu Manchu or James Bond villain rather than a Scooby villain. Sadly, we really don't get to see this guy very much. He only really shows up towards the end of the episode. His design is a white and teal oriental cloak and, of course, the golden mask on his face. I really like this design for the mask. Like I said before, I do have a soft spot for masks, and I would love to have a replica of this mask in my collection at some point. But just because I like the design doesn't mean it's necessarily a scary design. Other than the golden mask that could be worn by anyone, there really isn't anything that screams ghost to me. Honestly, he looks like a man wearing a mask, just like his goons. Like, they don't even try to cover up their hands or anything. You can definitely tell that this villain is more so concerned with just being efficient and killing the gang or covering up his secrets rather than being an ooga booga scary monster creature. But because of the golden mask, I think I'm going to give him a 3 out of 5. That gives Zencho 11 points, putting him in the B tier, and the Scare Parrot 8 points, putting them in the C tier. I think I'm definitely putting the Scare Parrot in the very back of the C tier though. Moving on, we have the Caveman from A Night with a Frozen Fright. So similarly to the Miner 49er, this guy really isn't a monster or a ghost. He's just supposed to be a caveman that got frozen millions of years ago. In reality, the caveman was Dr. Wayne. He was after his colleagues Dr. Engstrom's invention, which allowed him to communicate with marine fauna. How he went about this, of course, is only a plot a Saturday morning cartoon could get away with. So apparently, in the Scooby-Doo Where Are You universe, scientists find an actual caveman in a block of ice and are shipping it back to a place called Oceanland. Somehow in transit, this caveman ice cube gets lost at sea? Like, why? Why would you not take care of this thing better? Like, this is literally the biggest scientific breakthrough in human history. Like, you realize how much data and information and scientific breakthroughs we could get from a fully preserved caveman? Like, that's insane to me. I say this, but they literally have a computer in this episode that can talk to fish, and it's never brought up again. Anyways, after hearing about the real caveman that was lost at sea, Dr. Wayne's brilliant plan to get his colleague's machine that can talk to fish was take a rubber caveman costume, encase it in ice, and throw it into the ocean, and hope that someone finds it before it thaws out. Also hope that someone has the means to get this giant block of ice out of the water, and also hopes that someone who finds it takes it to Oceanland and not take it home or break it or call the Coast Guard or anything else a normal person might do. Dr. Wayne had an old fishing ship out in the ocean that has a fully working ice machine on it and can pump out what seems to be an unlimited supply of ice. What's the ice machine connected to? Where is it getting all this water? And how did he get this rubber caveman costume to stand up perfectly like a real person inside of a giant piece of ice when this ice machine only kicks out small pieces of ice? I don't know. These are mysteries that are never solved. Like, this guy's plans are so comedically insane, even for this show. Anyway, he planned on someone finding and bringing this fake caveman suit floating in ice back to Oceanland, and then engineered a situation where the caveman melted and broke free, and then went after Dr. Langstrom for some reason. I don't see how this plan could possibly have worked, because the only way to get Langstrom's invention would be to kill him or otherwise have him disappear. Because otherwise, if Dr. Wayne does take the invention, what's to stop Dr. Langstrom from just showing up days later and saying, hey, look, that's actually my invention. I have the proof here, including the blueprints to show it. Like, this only works if he's dead. But also, like, if he does die in a supposed caveman getting loose accident at this marine biology place, I mean, there's clearly going to be a police investigation, and I don't know. This plan is so stupid. Once again, Dr. Wayne would benefit so much more out of just outright killing Dr. Langstrom. Like, cut his brake line or something, you know? Any other thing, like, poison him. This plan of yours is so stupid. Like, no one's going to buy this. Though I will say, if it did work, it'd be the craziest murder in history. Like, a million-year-old caveman gets loose at a marine biologist lab and kills this super revered scientist, it would definitely go down in history as the craziest murder ever. Like, could you even persecute a caveman for murder? I don't think a caveman would understand right and wrong or laws or any kind of complex moral code. Anyways, it just so happens that while fishing, Shaggy actually manages to catch the caveman, and somehow his fishing line is able to pull this giant ice cube with a caveman in it out of the ocean. And of course, Velma knows about the caveman going lost at sea, so they decide to take it back to Oceanland. Once again, Dr. Wayne is the most unlucky person in the world, because these are the last people you want to find your rubber caveman in an ice cube. Now, apparently, Dr. Langstrom claims that the caveman would have drifted down to Oceanland anyways, but like, how do you know that? You know, like, there's not a significant line that water travels in. If anything, it could have went in the coast of the area, but it wouldn't have went directly to the building. That's just stupid. So Dr. Wayne puts it into the Arctic room and then later puts a portable heater next to the caveman, melting it. So after stuffing their faces at the malt shop,
Isn't there anything more to eat?
Just 2 slices of bread and an old ice cube.
I'll take it.
Shaggy all of a sudden remembers that he left his rod and wheel at Oceanland. Why did you bring it there? So the gang go back to Oceanland to find that, oh no, it looks like the caveman escaped and knocked a solid metal door off its hinges. So the gang investigate to find out what happened with the caveman and find Dr. Angstrom down at the pier. This is another one of those episodes where there's kind of a red herring being thrown. The gang believe that Dr. Angstrom is behind the caveman because he has a weird invention, and they just assume that it has to do something with the caveman. They find Dr. Langstrom down at the pier talking to fish, and trying to get closer, Scooby spooks Dr. Langstrom, and he runs into a little cabin. And when the gang open the door to the cabin, wouldn't you know it, it's the caveman. And he is not happy. So this leads to the caveman chasing the gang all across Oceanland. And I will say, I do like this setting. Oceanland is a pretty cool idea, like the idea of a aquarium at night. Now, like me personally, I'm terrified of the ocean. So seeing a bunch of sharks and different aquatic animals in tanks at night with no one there is definitely a freaky experience. However, the one thing I will say about this area is there isn't really any mystery to it. It's not like a haunted house or even a haunted base or a haunted aquarium. It's just an aquarium at night. And so all of the procedures that would protect the aquarium during the day are still implemented at night as well. There's not really a threat of like a shark getting loose or anything. There are some nice gags in this episode, like Shaggy and Scooby dressing up as a swordfish and a shark to lure the caveman out, which somehow works. But honestly, the aquarium aesthetic didn't really serve that much of a purpose to the episode, because a lot of these settings, like the haunted airbase and the graveyard of ships, they are kind of characters in themselves, you know? Like, they really do add a lot to the villain and the story. Honestly, it may very well be one of the worst locations simply due to the fact that it doesn't really add any spook factor to the caveman. I also think that having a caveman in this location doesn't really make a lot of sense in general. A caveman has very little to do with an aquatic setting. I feel like the creepy heap from the deep from the new Scooby-Doo show would actually serve better here in this setting than the caveman. So while it's clearly not the absolute worst setting, I'd say it is somewhat comparable to even the movie set from Never Ape and Apeman. Like, there really isn't anything inherently that creepy about a closed aquarium other than the fact that there are fish behind glass. So ultimately, I think I'm going to have to give it a 1 out of 5. The Austin Roberts song for this episode is 7 Days a Week, and the chase scene is pretty funny. There's like a whale sitting in about an inch of water. I don't think that's how whales work. In fact, I think that whale needs to get medical help right away. Now, the only similarities I can find from this song and the episode is maybe the obsessive nature of the caveman. Like, can't get the gang out of his mind. Other than that, I really don't see what 7 Days a Week has to do with anything in this episode. It is one of the more catchier songs, though. There's a really funny gag where the Caveman, Shaggy, and Scooby are on top of a boat motor and they're all like panicking. The Caveman's threat level is a different story. While the Caveman is just Dr. Wayne in a rubber suit, he does possess some insane strength feats, like mangling a solid freezer door off its hinges. He also tries any chance he gets to use his club on the gang. The Caveman is one of the most aggressive monsters in the original series, and is one of the few villains to try to kill the gang. Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby find the fishing boat that the Caveman came from. Somehow, Dr. Wayne got there unseen and turned on the ice maker, which made the Caveman. And this ice kept pumping out ice cubes, which would have eventually crushed the teens. This and Dr. Wayne's constant act of aggression towards the gang definitely puts him at a 5 out of 5 for threat level. I don't know what Dr. Wayne's eating, but I want some. The Caveman's design is honestly pretty disappointing. It's not bad or anything. It does serve the purpose of a caveman just fine. But I think the issue is, it is just a caveman. There isn't really anything that interesting in a caveman. I guess it's a unique monster against the other ghosts and ghouls, but the design is just bland and uninspired compared to most other creatures on this list. The one saving grace is the caveman's unhinged rage, something we really don't see much in these monsters. So while not Apeman levels of bad, I think I'm gonna have to give the Caveman a 2 out of 5 for design. That's 8 points, putting the Caveman in the C tier. Man, there's a lot of monsters in the C tier. Hopefully we can break that cycle here soon, and I think the next monster on this list will do just that. Long before the organ-stealing bat-winged creeper, or the walking TNT-filled creeper, there was the green-skinned, paper-demanding creeper. From Jeepers, It's the Creeper.
That must be the creeper!
Besides the Phantom's shadow, the Creeper is probably the most iconic Scooby-Doo monster of all time, even more so than the Space Kook or the Ghost of Captain Cutler. For proof of just how popular this guy was, in 2005, the Creeper appeared as the spokesperson for the JDRF Walk to Cure Diabetes commercial, produced by Cartoon Network.
Hi, I'm the Creeper, Scooby-Doo's spooky nemesis.
He also appeared in a State Farm commercial in 2013, and was one of the digitalized villains brought back to stop the gang in the movie Scooby-Doo Cyber Chase. The Creeper's popularity was at an all-time high around this time. A DVD set was released called Scooby-Doo's Greatest Mysteries. In it was 4 hand-picked episodes that was voted on by fans. These episodes were A Clue for Scooby-Doo, Hassle in the Castle, Jeepers, It's the Creeper, and Backstage Rage. 2 of those monsters, that being Captain Cutler and the Puppet Master, are already on the S tier list. These are the 4 monsters and 4 episodes that fans liked the most back in 2003. And Jeepers, It's the Creeper is the only episode from season 2 be voted as one of the best. So yeah, the Creeper's pretty popular. He was even used in an unused opening to the live-action movie. Safe to say, the Creeper is a staple villain in the series. In 1971, the first ever computer virus was even named after the Green Brute, which is quite an accomplishment. Even people who know very little about Scooby-Doo will recognize the Creeper as a Scooby-Doo villain. But Scooby-Doo Where Are You actually owes the success of the Creeper to someone else years prior, and we will talk about him here later. But first, let's talk a little about the episode. The Creeper shows up in this episode as a bank robber who plagues a local bank owned by a Mr. Carswell. This Creeper apparently was able to get in and out of banks, all while windows and doors are locked. The bank president claims that the Creeper is a phantom that could walk through walls, but the bank security guard was not so superstitious, and took it on himself to catch this so-called phantom. He installed a camera hoping to get the mysterious phantom on film, without notifying anybody at the bank. This was successful. However, the film used was special, and needed to be properly processed to reveal who the Creeper really was. The guard may have used this special film to conceal it from anyone in the bank in case one of them were the Creeper, which granted someone in the bank was, but also he could have easily saved himself the trouble by just taking a regular picture and then going straight to the police. Anyway, the guard leaves the bank to drive home with the blank picture in tow. However, the bank president, Mr. Carswell, who was secretly the Creeper, finds out that the security guard put cameras up in his bank and hunts him down to destroy the image. The Creeper drags a log into the road on the guard's route. Once the guard tries to remove the log, the creeper springs out and beats the guard unconscious, then proceeds to destroy the guard's car, searching for the film. With no luck, he leaves the guard for dead, which is pretty brutal for a Scooby villain. Fortunately for the guard, the mystery gang just so happened to be having a barn party down this road and come across the crime scene. They find the guard laying in the road, who wakes up just long enough to give them a blank piece of paper and tells them the flame will tell the creeper, then passes out. Seriously, this guy really needs to go to the hospital. The gang find a letter with the bank president's address on it. Not really sure why that's in the car, but anyway. So the gang thinks it's a great idea to take the guard to Mr. Carswell's home instead of, calling an ambulance? When they arrive at Mr. Carswell's home, he acts extremely concerned and pries the kids for knowledge if the bank guard told them who did this. This is also most likely a way of him telling if the guard knows whether or not he is the creeper. The gang tell the bank owner that the guard gave them a blank paper, mentioning the creeper, and then passed out. So the bank president tells them about this mysterious creeper and how it has been robbing his banks. They leave the unconscious guard in the president's capable hands, but keep the blank paper. Later, Mr. Carswell figures out what the paper was. He then ties the guard up in his basement, all Walter White Crazy 8 style, then goes after the gang as the creeper, so that he can destroy the evidence once and for all. So first off, this episode is actually fairly well written for a Scooby-Doo plot, and does a really good job at showcasing the creeper's insane threat level. When the gang came across the guard and his car, the first thing that goes through my mind is the sheer primal ferocity of the damage. This was done by somebody in a state of rage. Not really something you see much in a Scooby-Doo episode. But this works so well at building the tension and the threat of the creeper. This guy isn't just a guy in a mask, he is a potential killer, and will stop at nothing to get back this paper he so desperately searches for. This is really effective because when the creeper later shows up at the barn party, he is an imposing threat to the gang because we have seen firsthand what he is willing to do to one of his own employees. Again, having a creepy monster design is cool and all, however, someone with intent to do harm is always going to induce fear way more easily because it is a direct threat to one's safety. Also, keep in mind that the guard is a grown man and these are a bunch of teens. So if he can do that to a guard, well, yeah. This is why the threat level matters in these ratings for these monsters, because what kind of a threat they pose adds so much more to how great a monster they are. He is also way more aggressive than the vast majority of Scooby monsters. Mr. Carswell looks to be in his 60s or at the very least mid to late 50s, but man, he gets around. I don't think it will be surprising to anyone if he gets a 5 out of 5 for threat level. Like, he literally tries to throw a punch at the kids every chance he gets. Now onto the setting. While the countryside isn't the most original or interesting setting, I do believe it does the job it needs to do wonderfully for the creeper. Honestly, the countryside just makes me think of the creeper as like a urban legend type of monster, kind of like Slender Man, just waiting in the woods or in the fields. Much like how the theater was perfect for the Puppet Master or how the carnival was perfect for the Ghost Clown, I think the farmland setting alone might be lacking if paired with another monster, but it fits with the creeper so well. And farmland is also just creepy in general at night. There's a lot of real life stories of men or monsters or unnatural phenomenon on farmland, so I think I'm going to go ahead and give the setting a 5 out of 5. Again, I think you guys know where this is going to go. Now we get to talk about my favorite part, the design. And boy, does the creeper have a great design. But before we talk about the creeper's design, we need to talk about the person who influenced this guy. Now, I know I said that the Scooby Creeper predates many others that share that title, but this creeper is actually heavily inspired by yet another creeper, a horror legend by the name of Rondo Hatton. The story of Rondo Hatton is a very interesting yet tragic one, so I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about it properly. Rondo Hatton started off as a handsome and intelligent young man who loved sports, especially football. In 1913, he graduated high school with the title The Handsomest Boy in the Class of 1913. Now, I bring up his handsome looks here because it does come into play here in a little bit. He would later in life be known by a very different title, The Monster Who Required No Makeup. But how did this young man, who seemed to have his whole life ahead of him, earn such a title? After his years of school were over,
young Hatton would go into the field of journalism for sports, a field that he loved very much. You see, Hatton was actually a very intelligent man and was extremely passionate about writing. When World War I started, Rondo enlisted as a soldier, but also he put his journalistic skills to good use, sending many stories on the battlefront home. This would not last long, however, as Hatton would be badly injured in a mustard gas attack. This led him to being sent back to the States, where he was honorably discharged. After his recovery, he would once again pursue his journalism career. But years later, this is where things started to take a turn for Hatton. Over the next 18 years, Rondo Hatton started to notice strange changes, such as his skin and hands becoming thicker, his face growing longer, and having muscle and bone growth in places that an adult man shouldn't develop any. Soon, he became unrecognizable to his previous self. At the time, he and many others blamed this mutation on the mustard gas that he was affected by all those years earlier. However, it is now believed that these changes were from a condition known as acromegaly. Acromegaly is a form of giantism that can affect people later in their adult life. It's basically as if you went through a second puberty. This ailment negatively affected every aspect of Hatton's life, which included his wife leaving him, people fearing him in public, and a slew of health issues. It also affected his ability to work, leading Hatton into a deep depression. Still a reporter though, Hatton would be sent by the Tampa Tribune to write an article on the film Hell Harbor. While there, the director of the film took notice of Hatton's unique features and asked him to be in the movie as a villain. This small role is what started Hatton's short yet prolific time in the film industry. This also came at the perfect time for Hatton, as he would later have to retire from reporting due to his failing health. Now depending solely on disability checks from his time in the military and the small roles he would get in Hollywood. Hatton would usually be cast in small roles which included being thugs or henchmen of an overarching villain. Things would turn around for Hatton though, as he got a starring role in the movie Sherlock Holmes: The Pearl of Death as the Haxton Creeper. This role is what put his name on the map as the monster who required no makeup. He would return to play a different character called the Creeper in two other movies, those being The House of Horrors and The Bruteman. The Creeper in these two movies was notorious because he would kill his victims by snapping their spines. Now, I actually watched both of these movies in preparation for this part of the video, and while I will say that neither of these movies are necessarily good, it is Hatton's performance that really does make these movies memorable. Sadly, Hatton's condition would take his life before the movies were released, and so he would never get to see his final works of art. Despite his short time in the film industry, he is considered a horror icon, and has inspired many villains and monsters since, with the Creeper from Scooby-Doo being one of them. The reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I think his legacy is important when discussing why the Creeper's design works. The Creeper is both a unique monster made for the show, but also a homage to Hatton's history, which is really neat to see. I mean, you can see a lot of similarities with these two, like the larger than normal features of the Creeper, his large frame, his facial features, and even the way he moves. It is very reminiscent of the Hatton's portrayal of the Creeper in his movies. Even the Creeper poster for the Bruteman is similar to the Creeper's design in Scooby-Doo. Hatton's portrayal of the Creeper as a killer that murders his victims by snapping their spines is the kind of brutality I could see the Mr. Carswell Creeper doing. In fact, beating someone unconscious is probably the closest thing to actual death we actually see in the Scooby-Doo show. I like to think that the Creeper in Scooby-Doo is supposed to represent the ghost of Hatton and his portrayal of the Creeper, and that way his legacy lives on. I think it's really cool that they went ahead and did this, like they actually paid homage to a man and not just the monster he portrayed. Anyway, so now that you guys know what inspired the Creeper, we get to talk about his design. The Creeper is a stocky, green-skinned humanoid with a distinctive hunch. He wears a black turtleneck sweater with a worn dark green blazer and pants. Originally, the Creeper only spoken words were paper, but in the future appearances, this has changed to him just saying his name, Creeper. Now on paper, this isn't much of an improvement to the ghost of Elias Kingston or Mr. Hyde. All three of these guys are just wearing clothing and having face paint. But this is where things like posture, body language, and body contrast matters. The creeper has a very imposing stance, looking like a hunched brute with huge hands. He also looks like he has a 90-degree scoliosis. Like, my god, bro. Mr. Carswell is one limber man. Seriously though, this guy is terrifying, and he's surprisingly fast for his size. Remember when I said that Hyde felt like a prototype for the creeper? Well, I actually think the creeper would have made a far better Ghost of Mr. Hyde, because this guy has a lot more similarities to Hyde. The creeper also reminds me of Solomon Grundy from DC Comics. This raging brute monster is something we really don't see much in Scooby-Doo. And because of the history behind the creeper and the impact he has had on the Scooby franchise, I am of course giving him a 5 out of 5. Honestly, how can I not give him S tier? But is he better than the Phantom's Shadow or the Space Kook? Well, this is a tough one. I think he is maybe a little more iconic than the Space Kook, but I don't think he quite beats the Phantom's Shadow. The Phantom's Shadow setting, danger level, and designs are just too strong in my opinion. So for now, the creeper sits in second place in the S tier, and unless the next 4 can top this, this is where he will most likely stay. Oh yes, I almost forgot to mention, the Austin Roberts chase song for this episode is called Daydreaming. And man, I tried, I really did. But for the life of me, I have no idea what relation this song has to do with anything in this episode. The lyrics are about singing praises of a relationship with an ostrich. The only thing this song has in common with this episode is Scooby finds a baby chick, which thinks Scooby is his mother, and this chick kind of joins the mystery gang as a short-term member. And this baby chick is also a bird, and an ostrich is a bird. Honestly, any facade I had of these songs having anything to do with the episodes is quickly cracking away. I will say though, that as strange as the song is about falling in love with a giant flightless bird, it is super catchy and is probably one of my favorite chase songs of Austin Roberts. Anyways, moving on, we have the Headless Specter from The Haunted House Hang-Up. Scooby and the gang get involved with this Headless Specter the same way they always do, by trespassing. So the build up to this guy is actually pretty cool. So on their way to a rock concert, the gang get lost and run into a man on the road named Asa Shanks. They ask him how to get back to the interstate, and he tells them there are 2 ways, one shorter than the other, but that they should take the long way because the shortcut takes them past the Haunted Mansion and the Headless Specter. The gang being the gang, they decide to take the shortcut conveniently because the Mystery Machine is short on gas, and the Mystery Machine just so happens to overheat in front of, you guessed it, the Haunted Mansion. Honestly, it's just like a bunch of teenagers to let their car go and not put gas in or make sure they have coolant. So Fred tells Shaggy and Scooby to check the old well by the mansion for some water, and then this happens.
You, I hope. Yipes and triple yipes.
This has to be the most fake-looking ghost the gang have ever run up against. Shaggy tells Velma, and despite the sheer number of fake hauntings and spooky situations that Velma has been involved in, she 100% gaslights Shaggy like he is crazy.
But I tell you!
Shaggy, the non-material embodiment or essence or organism that's seen as a specter, wraith, or apparition has been scientifically proven to be a sheer myth. In other words, there's no such thing as a ghost.
Like, we get it. All the ghosts you came up against were fake, but they were still people in masks. You should at least give Shaggy a benefit of a doubt here. When the gang check out the well, they find that the ghost or the bucket for the water are nowhere to be seen. They spot a light moving throughout the old mansion and go to check it out, hoping that somebody is inside who can give them a bucket. Once inside, they get chased by a floating candle and discover a mystery involving a wooden head, changing pictures, and a headless specter. So this episode is one of my favorites from season 2. And for the first time in the series, the main monster of the episode is actually not the villain. The Headless Specter is just a man named Penrod Stillwell, the
Great-great-great-grandson of Jefferson Stillwell.
who was involved in the Civil War and is implied to have lost his head during the war. This is obviously a nod towards Stonewall Jackson, a Confederate general that was unfazed by the heat of battle, and so people would call him like a stone wall just sitting there. Penrod took on the appearance of his ancestor and fabricated the Headless Specter to scare away unwanted guests from the Stillwell property so that he could look for his ancestor's wealth, which was hidden somewhere in the old house. Not sure why he needed to do any of this, since technically this is his home, and as such he could simply just call the police if anyone messed with it. In fact, making up a haunted house story would most likely just invite curious people to investigate the place. This episode actually has a twist villain, and that being Asa Shanks, the man from the beginning of the episode. And he has, hands down, the worst ghost disguise in the whole series. It's like you took the Phantom's disguise from Hassel in the Castle and cut it in half, and then you just plop the top part onto a man's body. I would put him on this list, but I don't have a G rank, and I'm pretty comfortable with keeping the Apeman the worst monster in the series for now. So sorry, Asa, but you are so bad that I don't even really want to involve you in this list. The Stillwell Mansion is one of the best haunted houses in the original series, and although not quite the Sanders Mansion level, I think the Stillwell Mansion is a greater setting than the Hyde or Kingston homes. A lot of the decor and layouts of the rooms remind me a lot of both the Sanders Mansion and the Haunted Isle Castle. The use of paintings and fixtures being part of the scares and telling a story about the monster and its history is the kind of stuff that really builds up these monsters. The chase song for this episode is called Love the World, and the lyrics are about loving the world and being positive when feeling down. Could have some relation to the gang, maybe turning around the situation with the Headless Specter into a positive one. It's not really one of my favorites, but I still enjoy the chase scene. The song is also a really nice vehicle to show off the setting as well. A lot of the house aesthetics are used in the song as gags, like using a old spinning wheel as a bike. The Kingston Manor was a great first haunted house, but I feel like it really did lack that certain something that made it feel like a lived-in real home, and more like just a backdrop for a mediocre villain. Some of the mystique of the mansion is kind of given away sort of early, because you can see the Headless Specter placing items and using secret passages, and we'll get to that when we get to the threat level, but it does sort of hurt the overall setting a smidge. So while not perfect, I think it's probably the second best haunted house on this list, so I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. Let's go ahead and talk about the Headless Specter himself. The Headless Specter clearly takes inspiration from the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow, even down to the time period. The Headless Horseman is in itself a monster archetype, but the new Scooby-Doo show would actually bring in the legendary Horseman as one of the monsters of that show. The Headless Specter is dressed in a 1800s gentleman attire, and of course is headless. Somehow Penrod manages to tuck his head inside of this jacket, and it looks very uncomfortable. Also, old people in this show are insanely nimble for some reason. I really do love this guy, and honestly feel like he should have been more popular than he is. He also has a pretty iconic laugh, which is a staple for these great Scooby monsters. Now, while I do love this episode and the Headless Specter, I will say that it is pretty obvious that he is a fake pretty early on. We see him placing the wooden dummy head for the gang to find and hopefully get scared off, but this doesn't work and they realize it's just a wooden dummy. We also see him using secret passages. It's kind of reminiscent of how the Phantom used a telescope on Haunted Isle. I find it best that you just play these monsters straight, and the gang are the ones who unravel the clues, rather than the monsters actually showing the audience that they are, messing around behind the scenes. It does kind of plummet the believability in this monster. But the unsettling nature of a headless person chasing you around is certainly an unnerving one, so I think I will give him a 4 out of 5. He's definitely not one of the best designs, but far from the worst. Penrod was actually not a villain, and in fact he is the only monster from the original series that was completely justified in protecting his property. Now obviously he could have simply told the kids to leave his property instead of trying to scare them off. I don't believe he would have harmed the gang in any way, and definitely wouldn't have killed them. But here's the thing, he legally could have. Honestly, the fact that he went through this whole fiasco just to keep people away could have led to someone getting seriously hurt. Like this, for instance.
Are you all right? We had a soft landing. Thanks to the feathers.
Hey, what's this? Oh, my aching head.
So even though he probably wouldn't have harmed anyone, it still was not out of the question that someone could have been. So I give the Headless Specter a 1.5 out of 5 for threat level. This gives the Headless Specter a solid 10 points, placing him in the B tier, right behind the Ghost of Zen 12. Next up, we have the Witch Doctor from A Tiki Scare Is No Affair. The Witch Doctor is again one of my favorite Scooby monsters, and this episode is also one of my favorites. It really stands out for a lot of reasons, like the tropical setting, an actual giant statue that chases the gang around, the introduction of a trope used a lot later on in the Scooby franchise, which is the red herring villain that turns out to be a twist good guy. But what really makes this episode stand out is it's the only episode in the second season to not have a chase song. I tried finding out why this was, but I couldn't find any information. Perhaps this episode was the last one made for the series, and after Austin Roberts had already finished his stint at Hanna-Barbera. Or perhaps it was the first episode made, before he was brought on. Whatever the case, it makes this episode somewhat eerie compared to the others of the second season. Anyways, let's talk a little bit about the plot. While visiting Hawaii, Scooby and Shaggy are partaking in a luau by their host, Mr. Sims. Mr. Sims agrees to be the tour guide for the mystery gang, but Fred, Daphne, and Velma made plans to go on their own excursion to an ancient village on the island. Shaggy and Scooby tell Mr. Sims that they are not looking forward to it, and Mr. Sims warns them that they really shouldn't go because, you guessed it, it's haunted. Scooby and Shaggy are convinced to not go, but then this happens.
Trespassers, hear me! You are on the forbidden ground of Mono Tiki Tia! Leave at once, or face his vengeance!
And please do not ask me how Mr. Sims made the entire sky change color, because it's never explained. Also, Mr. Sims kind of sort of created a literal mecha, and yet again, like the fish translating machine from the Caveman episode, this is never brought up again. After this, all of the locals scatter and Shaggy is left alone. He races back to where the rest of the gang are and tell them that Mr. Sims and Scooby are missing. They go back and start looking for clues when they find a ghost drum bobbing its way towards the gang, which turns out it was just Scooby hiding. They find drag marks that lead into the jungle and are convinced this must be Mr. Sims being dragged away. So the gang enter the jungle and search for Mr. Sims, and a strange old man seems to be watching them from afar. The old man who was following the gang turns out to be working for the Hawaii Police Department. I guess the police are getting tired of all these masked criminals making fools of them, so if you can't beat them, join them. So the gang stumble upon the old ancient village that they were going to explore anyway, and come across the giant Mono Tiki Tia statue. It's later revealed that the giant Mono Tiki Tia is in fact, for a lack of a better word, a giant robot, and that Mr. Sims was actually the witch doctor and used the locals' superstitious fear of the village and Mono Tiki Tia to scare them away so that he and his gang could poach the island's pearl beds. The setting for this episode is, of course, the haunted fishing village, which reminds me a lot of the ancient Native American village in the cliffs from Decoy for a Dog Napper. But this village is far more fleshed out, and like the Temple in the Hills, this haunted village actually has a cultural significance to the people of this island, which would explain why they mostly just left it alone. It is an accepted legend, and the locals respect this land. The fact that this is a legit jungle with its own dangers, and a mountain that makes the whole sky change color, drums beating in the night, and a giant statue of a Hawaiian god throwing huts around, I think I'm gonna have to give the setting a 5 out of 5. It's up there with the abandoned airfield and the graveyard of ships. Now in terms of threat level, Mr. Sims was using an ancient village to poach pearls, and his whole illegal setup had to cost quite a bit of money. Also, I can't stress this enough, he actually had a fully working mecha. The Mono Tiki Tia statue might actually have been able to rival the Funland Robot when it comes to sheer strength. Now the real question is, would Mr. Sims have killed the kids? I believe he probably would have, albeit reluctantly. This whole setup was too big and cost too much to have a bunch of teenagers foil it. It would have been very easy to make the kids disappear in the jungle and make it look like an accident, all while adding weight to the legend of Mono Tiki Tia. But if he could have avoided killing someone, I think he probably would have rather just scared them. Regardless, a giant mech at his demand makes him a 5 out of 5 level threat in my book. The design of the Witch Doctor is one of the more iconic monsters from the original show, and I can't help but feel like James Gunn drew inspiration from this episode for the live-action movie. The mask itself really stands out, and is a far improvement to the Ghost of Geronimo's mask. The whole build-up to this introduction is also one of the best in the series, and establishes very quickly the kind of power the Witch Doctor has at his disposal when he turns the sky red. Still never explained, by the way. The one thing here that does work against him, though, is his voice. While I personally like the voice, it sounds like Mr. Sims, and he doesn't really do anything to mask it.
Trespassers, hear me! You are on the forbidden ground of Mono Tikitia!
Right, Mr. Sims?
I'm not talking.
It's a small flaw, but when we are talking about the design of these monsters, the voice does matter just as much. So unfortunately, I have to give him a 4.5 out of 5, which is still pretty high. This brings him to 14.5 points, placing him in the front of the A tier. I really wanted to make him an S tier, but I have to curb my own bias and try to be a little bit objective. He's nowhere near the likes of the Phantom Shadow or the Creeper, but far superior to the majority of Season 1. Next we have the Ghost Werewolf from Who's Afraid of a Big Bad Werewolf. This Scooby monster is one of the most hated monsters in the original series, and while I understand why to a degree, I also think he is the most underrated monster from the original series. Part of the reason this monster is so poorly looked at is he doesn't look like a werewolf. Now I get it, Scooby-Doo already did a better werewolf design prior in A Castle of Giggling Ghosts, despite that werewolf only showed up for like maybe 5 minutes of screen time. But I think people forget that there's a small asterisk in front of this werewolf's name, the ghost of a werewolf, or maybe a werewolf zombie, or a living dead werewolf. Honestly, it sounds like an edgy 14-year-old's OC, and it's very over the top even for Scooby-Doo. So like I said, I do understand why people dislike this design. He looks nothing like a werewolf. Honestly, with his head shaved, he looks more like an alien. But I do think context matters. He is supposed to be an undead werewolf, and as such, he would have some decay, and his features would also look very different to a living one. But we'll talk more about this later when I tackle the design. For now, let's get into the episode. The episode opens with the gang camping in the woods, most likely somewhere in the states of Oregon or Washington, since the campsite is near the Canadian border. While the gang are gathering around their campfire, they hear a wolf howl, and a pair of menacing eyes peer at them through the bushes. Velma claims,
Now, see?
It was probably only a wolf.
What do you mean only?
and once again, Shaggy is the voice of reason. Like Velma, you know that wolves usually don't travel alone. I would get in the mystery machine and get the heck out of there. So the gang go to check out where this wolf was and find wolf prints. Velma claims these are real wolf prints made by a large wolf, but there's something that bothers her.
There's only one thing that bothers me.
What's that?
Wolves are four-legged animals, but these were made by a two-legged one. A werewolf!
Real quick, I just want to say, the Ghost Werewolf really must have done his homework into the wolves he's mimicking, because even the child genius Velma Dinkley is convinced that the tracks are from a wolf. So the gang follow the tracks to an old graveyard and stumble upon an open grave.
Here lies Silas Long, half man and half wolf.
So I know that the Ghost Werewolf is trying to scare the gang by having the prints lead to the grave so they can read it, right? But why would the Ghost Werewolf tracks lead to the grave that he apparently came out of? Like, shouldn't the tracks be leading away from the grave? Which, granted, they do find tracks leading away from the grave, but like, why would he go back to the grave he came out of just to walk away from it again? It doesn't make any sense. So they follow the other pair of prints that go to an old sawmill, which, once again, with these monsters, why lead the gang right to the place where you don't want them to go to? Anyway, the gang split up as usual, and for the first time in the series, Velma, Daphne, and Fred are the ones that run across the monster first. And he kind of just pops out of nowhere. I'm not sure why they didn't see him, like, hunched down behind crates or whatever. It turns out the werewolf is actually a sheep rustler that helps smuggle sheep across the Canadian border in barrels with straws poking out of them. Honestly, way more believable than the snow ghost sending hollowed out logs over the border with diamonds in them. This episode is pretty awesome in my opinion, and like most of season 2, it feels really unique. There are a lot of great gags, and for the most part, the monster is pretty interesting. The main location is a sawmill in the woods near a shipport. Surprisingly, there isn't that many episodes that take place in the forest, despite how perfect the forest setting is for horror. Now, this is a side tangent, but the new Scooby-Doo movies episode with Batman and Robin involving the Joker and Penguin take place largely in the forest, and it's pretty awesome. Even though those episodes are so wacky and nonsensical, they actually utilize a lot of really cool settings in that show. The sawmill is a better version of the one from That Snow Ghost, and also the art in this episode is pretty great compared to that as well. It really uses the rustic aesthetic of an old cabin in the woods well. The idea of running around in the deep woods of Oregon while a vengeful spirit of a werewolf is in hot pursuit is pretty great. It gives off Friday the 13th vibes, or maybe a bit of the Quarry vibes as well. So for setting, I think I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. The Ghost Zombie Werewolf threat level is... can't believe I just said that. He's about the standard Scooby threat. He does lock Fred, Velma, and Daphne inside of the sawmill, but it's unknown what he would have done with them. The door that led to the sawmill would have had to been open again at some point, since this room was used for shipping carts. He might have had to kill them since they seen too much and clearly weren't running away. It's not like campers going missing in the wilderness is anything new, but I do feel like he honestly just wanted them out of his way so he could get back to his job. I mean, he looked like he was in the middle of a shipment. He even keeps up the facade of trying to scare Scooby and Shaggy away after locking the gang up. If he decided to just kill them all, then I'm sure he probably would have just called the rest of his crew to take care of them. So while it's possible he would have killed the gang, I'm not really sold on it. So I'm gonna give him a 3 out of 5. I'm curious. The full moon is out in this episode, which makes sense for a werewolf, but what if the moon wasn't full? Would this guy just be a ghost of a man, or would he still be a ghost of a werewolf? Like, how does that work? Maybe the gang only smuggled on a full moon, which would make more sense. Anyways, now on to the disguise. Yes, I think we all know the Wolfman design from A Castle of Galloping Ghosts is the superior werewolf design. But as I said before, context does matter. I think people compared it to a lot because they are both werewolves, and they forget that this werewolf is supposed to be an undead one. The green skin and decaying nose and tattered clothes also supports the idea that this guy was buried for a long time before he rose from the grave. And I like this design a lot, but what brings him down for me is his growl. Like, what kind of growl is that? It sounds more like a house cat or small dog. For a series that has some of the best monster vocalization in it, the Ghost Werewolf's growl is sorely lacking. Other than that though, I think it's a really solid design, and in my opinion, the most underrated one of the original series. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. With 11 points, that will put him into the B tier. And I do think it's a close one between this guy and the Headless Specter. But ultimately, I think the werewolf takes it by a very small margin. Honestly, it could go either way, but I think finding an empty grave in the middle of the forest that says on it that it's a resting place of a werewolf, and now that werewolf is alive again in the woods, howling and peering at you through bushes, it's just, I think it's the edge that it needs to probably beat the Headless Specter. So while chasing Shaggy and Scooby, there is this comedic bit where they give the werewolf a haircut, and normally in these comedic skits, they hold no real consequence to the plot. They are mostly used as a vehicle for Scooby and Shaggy to abuse a bit of Toon Force powers, but in this rare scenario, the werewolf actually keeps the shaved head for the rest of the episode, which also makes him the first monster to technically have 2 designs. The werewolf is the only monster in the original series to be unmasked and not given a proper name. He was just some guy, which is another reason why people dislike this episode. However, the Scooby-Doo Encyclopedia finally sheds some light on this. In the Ghost Werewolf bio, they named the culprit Frank Welker, and Frank Welker is the voice actor who voiced Freddie Jones and so happened to voice the werewolf in this episode. This was a meta way of honoring Frank Welker, as he is the only returning cast member to voice in Scooby-Doo since 1969, and he still voices to this day. Get used to his name because he's going to show up in my videos a lot.
You Autobots have gone to impressive lengths to recover your leader. Be assured,
I shall never underestimate you again.
The Austin Roberts chase scene plays the song Tell Me, Tell Me, which is probably my least favorite one of the songs in the series. But at the very least, I can once again say that it has some relevance to the chase, with the lyrics implying someone in a state of confusion or panic, which is fitting for the chase scene. Okay guys, last monster of this extremely long list is the Wax Phantom from Don't Fool with a Phantom. While attending a dance contest on the Johnny Sands game show, Scooby and Shaggy perform a very interesting dance, and this may honestly be the strangest thing that the duo have ever done. All is going fabulous when all of a sudden, a giant hulking ghost of wax destroys the studio, breaks into the studio's safe, ties up Johnny Sands, and apparently kidnaps the studio's manager, Roger Stevens. All done in this clip.
Hey, what was that? Scooby-Doo, where are you?
Right here.
What happened?
Johnny's famous for his publicity stunts, but this tops everything.
So I want you to look at this scene right here. See this guy sitting right here? This is Mr. Stevens, and this is the Wax Phantom. Keep that in mind because it will be important later. I think someone needs to go check on Big Bob Oakley in prison because he is either selling his super speed formula to other masked villains or wearing a monster mask somehow gives the user powers in this universe. I want to put in perspective just how crazy this is. The Wax Phantom does all of this, including tying up Johnny, breaking and emptying the safe, and making his way out of the building, all in the span of 6 seconds. After the lights come on, the gang find Johnny tied up and have the audacity to accuse him of throwing a publicity stunt. Not that strange powers don't exist or anything, but how could he tie himself up this quickly? Johnny tells them that it was the Wax Phantom, a sculpture from a fired artist who worked at the station named Mr. Brigsby. He had a TV show on the station, but due to low ratings, it was canceled. So he vowed revenge on the studio in the form of his wax statue coming to life and haunting the studio. So the gang go to investigate this Mr. Grisby, and it's really a shame that his house wasn't the main setting for this episode because it may actually have been the greatest haunted house in the series.
To live.
Nice place you have here, Mr. Grisby.
Like nice and scary.
Yeah, scary.
Looks like Mom's stew. Huh? I've heard of bubble gum, but bubble ghost stew? Ridiculous.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Mr. Grisby is an eccentric person who fully believes that he is the one who brought the Wax Phantom to life and that the Phantom is real. Also, much like Widow Cutler, he may actually practice real black magic, and at the very least, that is what is implied. So while Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby are visiting Mr. Grisby, Daphne and Fred check out the local wax museum, where the Wax Phantom was on display. The Wax Phantom is just hanging out here in full getup, by the way. So after being creeped out by Mr. Grisby, Scooby, Shaggy, and Velma leave to meet up with Fred and Daphne at the wax museum, but find that the door is locked. So they find a window and get inside. After the gang meet up, they are chased around by the Wax Phantom, and Scooby randomly finds plane tickets conveniently right next to him on the ground. So this clue alone would probably be enough to find out who the Wax Phantom is. You can find out who bought the ticket and when, but it gets way worse. The Phantom springs a trapdoor, trapping Fred, Velma, and Daphne inside of it. This Wax Phantom is also the crowned king of stupid because he puts the money stolen from the studio in a secret box in this room with the teenage sleuths. He had to realize that the teens would feel around the walls looking for a way out, right? And maybe he didn't know this either, but there literally is another secret door that the gang used to get out. So he did all of this just for the gang to find the money he stole and then take it and leave. Anyways, they get out and find the waxworks, with the Wax Phantom about to kill Scooby and Shaggy by dipping them into molten wax. I know we're not there yet, but The Wax Phantom is one of the most idiotic monsters in the series, but damn it, his degenerate heart would bring tears of joy to the Snow Ghost and the Ghost Clown. Daphne once again weaponizes her bad luck to save Scooby and Shaggy, and this leads to my absolute favorite chase song from the original series, Pretty Mary Sunlight. I give up with trying to make these chase songs have any relevance at this point, but this song is amazing, and I must not be the only one who thought so, because they use this same song again in the new Scooby-Doo movies with Jerry Reed performing it. Also, the episode with Jerry Reed is one of my favorite episodes from the new Scooby-Doo movies. He sings it in hopes of the gang finding him inside of a music hall where he was locked up. I 100% prefer the Austin Roberts version though. I have nothing against Jerry Reed, but just the Austin Roberts version is just objectively better. So after a Fred trap that encases the Wax Phantom, Scooby, and Shaggy, it's revealed that Roger Stevens was the Wax Phantom. Wait, what? So that means... Wait, hold on. So... Unless Mr. Stevens knows the ancient art of Shadow Clone Jutsu, he couldn't have been the Wax Phantom because he's literally sitting right here. This is probably an animation error, which happens a lot in this show, but it's a pretty serious one. I mean, you wouldn't blame me for thinking there's some kind of magic going on, because even if this is an animation error, somehow he managed to get away from the gang, dress up in the Wax Phantom costume, come back, destroy the studio, steal the money, tie up Johnny, all in the span of 6 seconds. That's even more crazy, I feel like, if it wasn't a clone. Like, how did he have time to do any of that? I'm starting to think that Mr. Grisby did use black magic here. Mr. Stevens used Mr. Grisby's threat of revenge to bring the Wax Phantom to life as an opportunity to rob the station of its money. So the TV station was already struggling financially. I suppose he thought it was the best option to just abandon ship. My question is, why was the TV station keeping all of its money in a safe in the next room to one of its studios? I guess security back then was just really, really lax. But if I was a company owner, I probably wouldn't keep all of the company's money inside of the main company building. It's just not a smart idea. Like, what if there's a fire? Now, I know I already gave the Wax Phantom a 5 out of 5 for threat level, but I want to just give a bit more details to it. He clearly has super strength and durability and super speed and is willing to murder in order to keep his secrets. But he's also one of the most brain-dead monsters in the series. For one, how is he that much of a Butterfinger that he lost his plane tickets? The ticket he needs for his plan to even work. Like, maybe he went back to the museum in his full Wax Phantom getup looking for the ticket, but like, why would you lose it in the first place? You should have kept it somewhere safe. Also, he traps Fred, Daphne, and Velma in the same trapdoor that he kept his money in, which is just weird. He hangs around the Wax Museum in full Wax Phantom getup, but like, why is he even still wearing the suit? It serves no purpose at this point. And why keep all the evidence that could incriminate you in the one spot where people who are looking for that evidence are bound to look? He could have been the very first monster on this list that actually could have gotten away with it if he just went straight to the airport, but he decided to hide money and drop tickets and keep the disguise when he didn't need it anymore. It doesn't make any sense. It does honestly feel a lot like how the new Scooby-Doo movies would have handled a monster, which I will get to that in a minute. Anyways, let's go ahead and get to the setting. The Wax Museum is the primary setting of this episode. It's like the County Museum, except on steroids. And it does a great job at using all of the wax rooms and displays well. The Wax Works is also pretty terrifying. It's a really dangerous place to be in. The setting also really matches well with the Wax Phantom, and I think the biggest thing working against it though is it is just a wax museum, and that's it. So while better than the County Museum or the Archaeology University, it's still not S-tier material. I think I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. The design of the Wax Phantom is pretty interesting, but honestly I feel like it is a bit lazy and ultimately forgettable. This episode was the last episode from the original series, and it definitely shows. This is really noticeable in later shows like the new Scooby-Doo show, where Shaggy and Scooby's comedic gags take precedent over the monster's threat. But you can definitely feel the tone shift in this episode. Part of the reason why some of the previous monsters were so intimidating is because they were played straight. They weren't really played up for gags as much. So despite how much of a threat the Phantom actually is here, I feel like they downplay it quite a bit and make light of him, even down to him being kind of a chatterbox. This episode is also not very well known. In fact, I only watched it about 15 years ago. To put into context, I was raised on this show, but never once did I see this episode on TV. I don't understand why this episode was such a rarity, but perhaps it was because it was the last episode in the series and it simply just got less present than the rest of the series. Regardless, the episode feels like a transition to the new Scooby-Doo movies, and even the Wax Phantom feels like a monster that could have been from that show. His design is a hulking heap of wax taking a human form. I feel like this would have worked so much more if maybe the wax moved on him as he walked, you know, kind of like it like dripped and he could like take advantage of the idea that it's wax to shapeshift. A smidge, not like a lot or anything. They do this concept so much better in the quote-unquote third season of Scooby-Doo Where Are You in the episode The Tar Monster. The Tar Monster was like a Lovecraftian eldritch creature born from primordial ooze, where this guy is just a pile of green wax. He is an impressive threat, but I feel like the idea of a wax monster was kind of wasted here. But I do have to give him credit for being unique. So I'm going to give him 2 points for design. That gives him a total of 10 points, slotting him into the B tier, right underneath the Headless Specter. Well gang, that's it. That's the Scooby-Doo Where Are You tier list. This episode has taken me upwards of 6 months from conception to completion, and has been quite the ride. I really hope you have all enjoyed watching as much as I have enjoyed making this video. I think this may actually be the longest video that I have ever made, or at the very least, it has taken the longest time to make. So I want to give credit to the majority of the artwork in this video being created by Tim Levins, who recreated most of the designs from the original show for the Scooby-Doo Encyclopedia. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of high definition images of these individual monsters, so I had to trace over a lot of his work and some other sources so I could use them for this video, but all credit goes to the original artists. I also want to give full credit to him and the creators of the original show for these fantastic designs. Also, I want to thank Scooby Wiki and the Scooby-Doo Encyclopedia for all the information that I gathered from them. But with that out of the way, what do you guys think about the tier list? Let me know who is your favorite or least favorite monster in the comments below. Who would you place in the S tier? There will be more videos coming soon, but until then, this has been Tender Chicken Guy, and I will see you all later. Peace.